Welcome to this special meeting of the Santa Barbara City Council. Today's May 3rd, 2021. We'll start with our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks. Mr. Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Alejandra Gutierrez.
Here.
Councilmember Harmon.
Here.
Councilmember Sneddon.
Here.
Councilmember Friedman.
Here.
Councilmember Jordan.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Oscar Gutierrez.
Present.
Mayor Murillo.
Here. Thank you very much. This is a budget hearing. So, Mr. Clerk, if you would read item number 1 into the record.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Item 1, fiscal year 2022 recommended operating and capital budget.
Okay. I think Mr. DiMartini, our finance director, will come on in a minute. I wanted to say how we will run the meeting is I believe the library item will go first, and then we'll do public comment for the library. And then when we're finished with library, we'll have a presentation on airport, and then we'll open public comment again for just a different topic. So there'll be 2 public comments for this. And what I would say to my council members is make your lists of the department heads will be coming forward with ideas about what they can cut. We're on a mission to save money because our revenues are down. So keep your lists, and we'll be weighing those decisions at the end of the process, so in June. And Mr. DiMartini, maybe you had something along those lines to tell us about how you see the process going forward. Go ahead, please.
Thank you so much, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. I appreciate your time today. Just to reiterate, Madam Mayor, some of your overarching comments and sort of the process and the plan for the upcoming sessions. There are a total of 7 public budget work sessions that are scheduled throughout the next couple of weeks. This is the first one for the airport and for the library will be today. Then there'll be 6 more for budget presentations for departments coming forward. And then towards the beginning of June, actually scheduled for June 9th, is when the City Council will hear sort of a summary of all of the proposed changes to the recommended budget, and will allow the City Council to deliberate. That will also be the evening when the full City Council will receive the budget recommendations from the many sessions that will be occurring during the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee is also hearing specific topics as well, and so that will come to the full Council for recommendations at that time also. And so as you indicated, this is a great time to be having a discussion with department heads and city staff regarding questions that you might have or any specific requests that you might have in the proposed budget as well. And so with that, I'd like to turn it back over to you, Madam Mayor, and then start our first presentation. Thank you very much.
I was on mute. Thank you so much, Mr. DiMartini. Library staff, are you ready to start? There's Ms. Cadiente, welcome. Welcome to the meeting. Ms. Weta, good to see you. Thank you. Ms. Hernandez, welcome. Go ahead.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much, Madam Mayor. We are so excited to be the first department to launch into the budget presentations for fiscal year 2022. And with that, I will ask for the next slide, please. So a little outline for what we'll be going over today. I'll do a brief overview of our organizational chart for the library, talk a little bit about our COVID response in FY21. Then we'll get into the FY22 general fund proposal, with the proposed fee changes and budgetary impacts. And we'll take a brief look at the county fund proposed, the capital plan, and then wrap up with our FY22 P3 projects. The image on the right, we took with our library drone, and you can see we're all practicing social distancing and properly masked. Next slide, please. So the library department as a whole has 6 programs, 2 funds, and a total of 34.8 FTE. Now, the boxes in a darker shade of blue represent either a director, a manager, or supervisor position. So you can see you have a library director with a small admin team, one of those positions currently vacant. And we have a library services manager, Molly Wetta, who's on the call with us today, who oversees all public-facing programs for the library. So she has a few supervisors reporting to her, currently a vacant supervising librarian position that oversees our collections and technical services team. The senior librarian for youth services and outreach reports to her, and then the circulation supervisor, Ariana Bilek, also reports to her. Then there are various work groups that do not have supervisors: the communication team, the adult services team, the adult education team, and the East Side branch team all report to Ms. Wetta. And then Christina Hernandez is our second library manager at the library. She is our budget manager, as well as oversees all operations for us. So the capital program and different behind the scenes items she oversees, as well as she has our technology team reporting to her with the senior librarian, Alan Dussert, and she also has the county branches in Carpinteria and Montecito reporting directly to her. Next slide, please. So we have a few proposed staffing changes in our budget proposal, some reclassifications specifically in our IT division. The senior librarian, we're proposing to change to an IT supervisor that better aligns with his duties, and then the library technician that's reporting to the senior librarian for technology, transitioning that position to a library system technician to really help support the growing technology needs at the library. And then within the administrative division, looking to reclassify our administrative specialist to an admin assistant, which is more in line with what other city departments have. And then as you could tell in the organizational chart in the previous slide, the library department does not have a lot of supervisor support. So we are looking to add a senior librarian and then appoint a library technician in FY22. Next slide, please. So our FY21 COVID response, big line here is the library never closed. We got busy right away, whether it was through SBPL Delivers, sponsored by our Library Foundation, or creating new cards such as our homebound card, or making it easier to get an e-card. Access to materials and technology, supporting adult education and youth and family services were the core objectives for your library over the course of this last year. And I could give you lots of stats and figures, but I'd like to just share a few real life stories with you. I mean, there's a lot of people really focusing over this course of the year and how can I get my books? How can I place my holds? But there's so much other great work that was happening at the library. For example, we have seniors who found themselves completely isolated and without the ability to communicate and connect with their families across the country, because prior to COVID, they didn't have to do that on the internet. They could do that in person. And so we not only outfitted them with the Chromebooks and hotspots, but taught them how to use the software, and have so many stories of seniors who now are digitally inclined to connect with their loved ones all across the world. We have other stories of undocumented mothers who were struggling to get their COVID relief benefits because they were undocumented, and our staff worked with them, and mothers told us, now that I have this support and this funding, I don't have to rely on the lunch at the library to be the only meal that my children are eating this year. So just really powerful stories every single day at the library, and I couldn't be more proud of all the work that this team has done. The pictures here show one of our patrons checking out one of our new Chromebooks that we immediately sought to find more hotspots, because this became the growing need. Without people being able to come into the library to actually use computers, that was something that was truly challenging to replicate, and people experiencing homelessness or people who just didn't have this technology at home needed our support. And then even though our youth services team jumped on immediately and did virtual story times and all different classes, Zoom fatigue set in, and our team realized that, and so they created story walks in the park, and we're really thankful for the Parks and Rec team for supporting these initiatives too. You can see they just literally put a picture book on big boards, and the kids walk through the park with family and caregivers, following prompts, having learning opportunities, and then they leave with a great little early literacy kit to go home and continue their learning. So overall, your library supported your community during this last year, and very proud of them. Next slide, please. So this is the library budget as a whole. So the total budget for the complete department is just over $7.3 million. You can see the blue here are the city libraries, and then the county libraries make up the 13% of our overall budget. On the left here, you can see the major funding sources for both of those funds. And I do wanted to take this time to recognize our support groups, our Friends of the Library and our Library Foundation. The Library Foundation, as you know, is setting the example for what private-public partnerships can do and how they can truly form these relationships to make your library even better. And they help support needed capital projects that perhaps the city cannot always fund. They're working to create endowments so that the community can leave a legacy at the library, and is really supporting that bigger overarching needs of the library. Our Friends of the Library every year help support our summer reading program, our Harry Potter celebration, 1,000 books before kindergarten, the giveaway books during summer reading, and our materials budget as a whole. And so both of these groups deserve a shout out and praise and thank you. So thank you. Next slide, please. So now we're going to go to the general fund proposed fiscal year FY22 plan. Ms. Hernandez, our library services manager, will be presenting this section.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and members of the council. I will start with a general overview of our general fund. Next slide, please. Yes, so for our general fund revenues, you'll see in the first column, we have our FY21 adopted budget for this year. Next, followed by the FY21 year-end projections. Now, these projections are as of mid-year, with us still not knowing if we would be open by the end of, by the fourth quarter. A little later in the presentation, you will get to see the actual impacts that COVID-19 has had on our revenues. The third column is what we are recommending for FY22, and then followed by any changes from budget. So first we have library fines and fees, and these incorporate our fees for lost and damaged materials, as well as those existing fees before we actually went fine-free. Also, the next area is our rents, and so these are our meeting room charges for all the different spaces in the library. Both of these categories will be below target this year due to library closure throughout the year. But now that we're slowly moving into our new phase of reopening, we have no significant recommendations or changes to next year. Our third area is our county per capita, which is based on our service population. And we will be seeing an increase in fiscal year 22 to our service population. So this also increased our revenue in per capita, as well as there is a slight increase in our city admin fee, and this is the fee charged to manage the county branches. Our service charges incorporate our copier fees or things like our book sales, and our donations, our general donations from the public. And again, both of these areas will be below target this year, but as we're moving into reopening, we have no significant recommendations for changes for FY22. Our grants, so these represent our federal and state grants that support things like our adult literacy program, our adult education program that incorporates our SBPL works, that's our career readiness program. And so the significant change that you see here from this year to next year is for our adult education program, we did receive just over $70,000 in revenue for next year. However, they're changing the funding just a bit. We are just receiving revenue for 1 year instead of receiving it for multiple years at one time. Another change that's represented in this area is our Family Services Agency grant for adult literacy. We just completed this year a 5-year cycle for this grant, so that change is reflected as well. And for other revenues, this represents our contribution from the Friends of the Library. Now, we want to ensure that these funds continue to support community education programs, our youth programs, collections, as well as our summer reading program as they are intended. So what we're proposing to do is to hold these funds in a trust next year and then to pull them throughout the year as needed. Next slide, please. For expenditures, You'll notice that in salaries and benefits, overall, there was a 7% increase in salaries and benefits. However, I'd like to note that you will see later on that we did have to make a significant reduction to salaries and benefits for our hourly salaries. Supplies and services are on target this year. There is a reduction that we are recommending in FY22. Most of this is due to a change in the way we account for a portion of our digital content. So in past years, our digital content acquired through Black Gold was included in our service fees to Black Gold, so it would appear in our supplies and services line. So this year we pulled that out and we added it to our acquisitions line for better tracking of both our digital and print content costs. So it may seem like there's a significant reduction in the supplies and services line and a significant increase in our book acquisitions line, but actually we just are moving funding around so we have better tracking. And then our allocated costs, there is an increase in this line in FY22. This is partially due to we are adding a new library on the go van, so there is increased vehicle maintenance costs there, as well as other increases in our allocated costs, planned building maintenance, property insurance, but most significantly in our network infrastructure costs. Next slide, please. So now I'll briefly discuss our proposed fee changes for FY22 that mainly have to do with the use of our meeting rooms. Next slide, please. So we are actually proposing an additional tier for co-sponsored programs. So the library receives more requests for partnered programs generally than our staff have capacity to handle. And we also receive requests from outside agencies who rent the room to promote their events on the library website and in our newsletter. And also we're seeing an increasing need for small nonprofit groups who need access to low-cost rental spaces for events that benefit the whole community. So to address this need, we are proposing a co-sponsored tier. So in the first two columns, you'll see our current fee schedule for rental of our spaces. The first represents the initial 3-hour period, followed by each additional hour. Now those will remain the same. And then on the two columns on the right are the proposed new tiers. So if an agency is approved for a co-sponsored program, they would pay the reduced rates in the two right columns, one for the first initial 3-hour period, and then the other for each additional hour. Next slide, please. So what we are proposing for our meeting rooms is we would like to amend our current meeting room policy to allow for-profit groups and private use of the room. This would allow for some additional revenue. We would still retain the prohibition on any commercial activities in our rooms. And those agencies would also be required to, in any of their promotion or advertising, put a disclaimer that this is not a library sponsored event. But for co-sponsors, we would submit proposals for the room, and then we would evaluate how those proposals align with our library's mission. We would check the schedule and availability of the room, and those that line up nicely, we would approve for the co-sponsored rate, and then they would pay that reduced rate. We would also be able to promote those events as co-sponsored events and have them listed on our website, on our calendar, and in our newsletter. So generally, library staff, we plan our programs seasonally. So we usually have our calendar planned out at least 4 to 6 months in advance. And then about 3 to 5 months in advance, we would be able to open our calendar to those co-sponsored events. And then 3 months in advance, we would allow for-profit groups for general use of the meeting room according to our existing policy. Next slide, please. And I'll briefly now go over the county fund for our Montecito and Carpinteria libraries. Next slide, please. So for the county libraries, most of the revenues, there's no significant changes with the exception of you'll see a large increase in the county per capita line. This actually reflects the Santa Barbara County has identified some additional funding and committed to that for this year and for next fiscal year for those county locations. And this would be in addition to the per capita that they're already receiving. Also, the city of Carpinteria is increasing their contribution on behalf of the Friends Library. So you will see a 45,000 increase for the city of Carpinteria, and then that decrease for the Friends of the Library is reflected in the other revenues line there. Next slide, please. And for county fund expenditures, just to note that their allocated costs are increasing slightly over $11,000 next year. Also, their acquisitions for their print and digital materials purchases is also increasing 20%. A portion of that is also due to us pulling out those Black Gold digital costs, which is reflected in the reduction in their supplies and services line, and that increase is reflected in their acquisitions line. Next slide. And now I will hand it back over to Ms. Caliente, who will review some of the budgetary impacts from COVID-19. She will discuss our reduction measures and that impacts on our service.
Thank you, Ms. Hernandez. As Ms. Hernandez stated, now is the time for me to explain our overall cuts and reductions that we are taking and that have been impacted to the library in FY21 and FY22. So next slide, please. So the information on the left of your screen are expenditure cuts that we experienced in FY21. So a cut is something that's removed from the budget and is not returning most likely, whereas the FY21 reduction measures, that would be what we did to hold things vacant for the COVID reductions. So they both impact services, but they are different. So I want to make sure you understand and that's clear. So for the expenditure cuts in FY21, we saw just over $88,000 that we had to remove from our budget. And then in addition to that, we held key leadership positions vacant throughout this year for a total of $350,000 in reductions. Next slide, please. Similarly, as Ms. Hernandez illustrated in her piece of the presentation, the revenues were impacted in FY21 as well. We anticipated $108,000 to be received as revenue and have actualized just over $11,000 this year. And of course, we had increased COVID expenses that were not planned for at the time of the budget, all the various PPE and the increased materials and services to provide to the community, such as Chromebooks and internet hotspots. Next slide, please. So for FY22, in order to submit a balanced budget, we did have to experience some additional expenditure cuts of $169,000, most of those coming from our hourly salaries and benefits budget lines. And then we will continue to hold key leadership positions vacant, reducing our hourly staff as well for a total of an additional $265,000 for reduction measures for our contribution to the overall savings of the city for FY22. Next slide, please. So just to summarize, both years seeing over $400,000 either being cut or reduced at the libraries for a total of $926. Next slide, please. So what does this mean in terms of service level output? Well, I first like to talk about what it takes to have the central library open. So in order for the central library to be open any day of the week, we need at minimum 10 staff members for every hour. That's for phones, chat, children's library, main level, upper level, materials handling, adult education, supervision. And typically we need more than this. We have Spanish outreach, we have Spanish phone lines, we have a lot of things happening when we're open to the public. It takes 13,104 hours annually to be open for 36 hours a week. Existing staff capacity, we have 14,144 available service point hours. So the 36 hours at 13,000 hours annually gives us some gap for vacancies or other issues that would allow us to have some give and take in that number. Duties outside of service points, as illustrated in our COVID-19 response, we do so many things beyond the operation of this building, everything from ordering books and supplies, cataloging those, processing the materials, shipment, research requests, required city trainings, grant applications, programming and outreach, partnership development, school district support, planning, evaluation, the list goes on. There's a lot of activity that happens, not a direct service to service points at the central library. Next slide, please. So the overall proposal for the adjustment of open hours at Central Library, we were open 55 hours and 7 days a week pre-COVID. We are proposing to go to 36 open hours in 5 days. This will also have us experiencing a 25% reduction in programming and prioritizing our grant-funded programs of stay and play in our adult education division. The program reductions most likely will come in the form of the more fun, adult, engaging type of events, more cultural art events, while focusing on the reopening of our city. Our adult education is our priority. East Side, similarly, was open 39 hours and 6 days a week pre-COVID, and our proposal is 28 hours a week and 5 days a week. And they will be experiencing a 50% reduction in programming and prioritizing their adult education and Spanish language programming. Next slide, please. This is really an opportunity for the library to recalibrate its priorities. And we have so many value-added programs like SPPL Works, our Career Resource Center, our OG Readers, which is our Orton Gillingham program that really helps to support students from the school district and elsewhere who are struggling readers. Again, so many fantastic stories come out of these programs where children who are in 5th grade reading at 1st grade level now get to their actual grade level. So this is important, critical work for our community, and we do not feel like stopping it is of value. So we'd like to continue that, as well as our stay and play, financial literacy classes. And I could list a million things in this bullet because we have so many value-added programs that we have to serve our community. We also will be launching our Library on the Go van, and we have reassigned staff to that. So while we did a fantastic job of finding donations and for this wonderful van, we do need to borrow staff from Central Library in order to make it happen. But this is going to allow us to target services outside the building and to really reach more unique users. So to illustrate, as an example, those 10 people I spoke to needing to be at Central Library for 1 open hour. Now instead, we'll have those 10 people divide and conquer. 2 will be providing outreach at a school. 2 will be providing outreach to seniors at a senior housing. 2 will be hosting a class visit. 2 will be hosting stay and play. 2 will be working with partners to plan for future collaborations. So there's just diminishing returns for open hours, and this plan is going to help us balance open hours for general use with targeted services to support our most vulnerable members of our community. And there are other options that we can look at for getting people the books, right? If people need to come in and access holds or things like that, there is technology that we could look to implement to allow people to access holds pickups and things like that. But this plan, we believe, is the best for us moving forward. Next slide, please. Now I'd like to hand it over to Ms. Weta to go over our collections budget.
Thank you, Ms. Cadiente. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and members of council. First, I'd like to talk to you today about our collections budget. And as we've been sharing for the last couple of years, we've been having more and more strain on our existing collection budget due to new demands from our public. And so here you see in the print materials that we're able to purchase, that portion of our budget represented in green. The digital content that we're able to purchase is in orange, and then in blue is the black gold portion of our digital content, our shared resources with the entire library cooperative that Christina mentioned. We are pulling out of that supplies and services line and moving to our acquisitions just to better reflect what our actual investment in collections is. And so you see the significant change happened as we experienced decreasing budget in FY20, yet demands for digital content have been skyrocketing. So in FY20, due to popular demand from the public, we were able to add resources such as lynda.com LinkedIn Learning, which is courses on everything from becoming a manager to learning different technology like Photoshop, really material that is best delivered in that type of format rather than learning from a book, as well as Mango Languages, the premier language learning software on the market that our adult education team uses to help people learning English as a second language, to many members of our community who are looking to increase their capacity to speak a number of foreign languages, from Japanese to Spanish to Portuguese, and a huge number, as well as the addition of Canopy, which we received numerous requests monthly to add that streaming video content. And we were anticipating that these would be offset by a reduction in our physical audiovisual, with decreased demand for DVDs and other technology. We phased out the purchase of music CDs and are now phasing out the purchase of physical audiobooks as more people are accessing these on digital platforms. But the demand has increased so much that you see each year we're adding more and more to our digital content and sacrificing the amount of material we're able to purchase in print. And this is due to a few of our services like Hoopla, which we pay per use. So as we have the number of increased users, we see increased costs for that, as well as we've been adding content to our Overdrive Advantage collection. So this is what we purchase for Overdrive and ebooks and e-audio on top of what Black Gold offers, just to decrease wait times and increase the variety of materials available to our public. So that just kind of tells the story of the increased demands on our collections budget. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, it really is new, unique users that are driving this change. In 2019, we saw a 10% increase in unique Overdrive users. And due to the pandemic, a lot more people are accessing digital content. People who were previously shy about learning a new platform have been taking advantage of the one-on-one assistance that we've offered to get them set up to use the technology, as well as the classes that we've offered. And we saw an 18% increase in Overdrive. And then for Hoopla, it's even more staggering. It's a 25% increase and then 37% increase in the last year. And so more people accessing content, especially Hoopla, is just going to continue to drive up costs, which reduces the availability of our budget for print materials, which are especially important for certain areas such as children's nonfiction. And to be able to support our schools, we really need to have robust collections in that area. Next slide, please. All right, I also just want to mention, as we've previously discussed, the implications of an independent Zone 4 in Goleta has had on our collections. Right now, 20 to 25% of our Santa Barbara Public Library cardholders live outside of our jurisdiction in Zone 4. And this is not consistent with all of the cross-boundary usage that we see, which is pretty typical given the way that library cards can be issued to anybody living in the state of California. But right now, if we exclude the zip codes 93110 and 93105, which have areas both in both service areas, Santa Barbara Public Library has 10 times more out-of-zone card holders than Goleta. So this is really an issue that impacts us greater than the other jurisdictions. And because of we are able to determine the actual digital costs for Hoopla and Canopy on these card holders, it's more than $100,000 a year. So a significant portion of our overall collection budget is supporting residents who don't even live in our service area. It's also interesting to note that the number of Overdrive users that Santa Barbara Public Library has gained since Goleta became an independent jurisdiction is almost exactly the amount that they have lost. So we are really seeing people choosing to get a library card membership at Santa Barbara to have access to our increased content from Goleta. And recently, Goleta has reduced the number of Hoopla checkouts from 10 to 5. So we only expect this to exacerbate the issue as people who rely on that content regularly are impacted by that decision. This also means increased wait times for both print materials and digital content for our local residents because of the usage by people who live in Zone 4. And it's also important to note that the staff spend a lot of time assisting actual Goleta cardholders who call with account questions and concerns. And this also impacts the level of service that we can provide for all of our residents. Next slide, please. Now turning to the discussion of social services at the library. Pre-pandemic, the library had visits from people experiencing homelessness about 100, 150 people a day. And as anyone who is walking around our city can tell, that these numbers are only expected to increase when we're fully reopened to the public. It is challenging to balance our regular library services with addressing the needs of the people experiencing homelessness. Now, we provide a lot of services to these individuals, our neighbors, routinely. We offer referrals to other agencies, and we've worked with many of them in our adult education. That is absolutely services that we want to continue to be provide, but many of them require more expert assistance and that isn't really capable of being supported by library staff. So to this end, library management has been actively participating on the SB Act steering committee, our shelter working groups, and the prevention working groups, just to work together with the other stakeholders to see how we can collectively address these challenges our community is facing. Next slide, please. So to that end, adult education is now in process of becoming a point of entry in the HMIS system. And we're going to be launching a new program to assist people with obtaining the vital documents needed for housing. So many people may become eligible for housing or be interested in that, but one barrier is that they don't have a birth certificate or a social security card or other documents necessary. And this was a program that came out of these working groups with SB Act and stakeholders. We heard about a similar program ran by volunteers in Santa Cruz that had really addressed this gap in services, and the other stakeholders identified this as a really a crucial step that we could address. Since we're already working with a significant portion of this population in adult education, we're hoping to be able to train some of our volunteers and have staff really coordinate that just to provide that one level of service. But nationwide, we see an increasing number of cities and counties are providing trained social workers in library spaces. Because these folks are already accessing the library, we're already a source of services for them, already a place where they gather. It's an ideal location to connect them to additional services. It's no longer a trend and is really becoming a standard. And there are many models that can be adapted to our local needs. So we are really committed to being a point of entry and collaborating with other stakeholders to address the needs of this population, but we need additional resources to do so, and really feel like the library could not only help on the humanitarian front with connecting these folks to services, but could also address some of the challenges that they provide to the downtown neighborhood as well, if they were able to access services on an ongoing basis here at the library. Next slide, please. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Cadiente to discuss our capital program.
Thank you, Ms. Sueta. So I'll just be going over some of our funded projects that we have looking forward to, and then some of our unfunded priorities. Next slide, please. So the library's central library automated materials handling system and the central library lower level workspace renovation are both funded projects for the city libraries, and we're very excited for that. The automated materials handling system checks in about 2,600 items per hour and will really allow for us to begin resource sharing again with Black Gold. As you remember back in December when we discussed resource sharing, it actually costs Santa Barbara libraries hundreds of thousands of dollars in staff time to participate in the resource sharing with Black Gold. So the automated materials handling will hopefully reduce that impact. And of course, the lower level workspace has not been renovated since 1979, I believe. So very much looking forward to that project. Next slide, please. The Central Library ADA compliant elevator. So we are in our final stages of this project with building and safety. It is a $2 million project, and we are hoping to begin construction on this in 2021. We understand that it'll be challenging to do this after COVID. We wish we could have done it while the library was closed, but that was just not feasible to get through all of the plan checks. And then our East Side Library garage. So you'll hear a little bit later about the Library on the Go van and what we have planned for it next year. This van is a state-of-the-art van. It holds a lot of technical equipment. In addition to that, it's not a regular bookmobile. It's going to, staff will be offloading and onloading different kits and collections depending on where they're going. So if they're going to a preschool versus a senior center, so this garage will allow them to store those materials as well. So we're going to be looking at the East Side Library as the destination for that. Next slide, please. So for our total funded projects for the library for FY22 and FY23, just over $3.2 million. Next slide, please. I just wanted to cover a few of our unfunded priorities. The East Side Library has 2 fantastic outdoor patios that we really would like to create early literacy patios out of them. If we can create spaces where children can use manipulatives and creation stations and imagination stations, reading nooks, and just a safe environment for them to practice all the early literacy development skills. Next slide, please. So you're all aware of the Library Plaza campaign by our Library Foundation, and that is going very well. And we also have the ability to open the Faulkner Gallery out into the plaza. And then we'd like the additional piece of this commercial kitchen to help serve that entire event space. You can imagine a downtown event happening at the Central Library that can be supported by a commercial kitchen, and having the Faulkner Gallery, which can hold hundreds of people, and then the plaza itself with the capacity to hold over 1,200 people. We could do quite an event. And then the Central Library roof terrace, that has been a priority for many, many years. And so we are looking forward to that project as well. And both of these spaces, while they're going to create opportunities for the library programming and community programming, could also turn into revenue for the library as well. Next slide, please. So our teen space, we have had robust activity in terms of our children, our focus on children at the Central Library in particular. And over the course of the last few years, we've really focused on developing teen programs, but it's a little bit different with teens. It needs to be teen driven. It's not a staff driven process when you're creating spaces for teens. So while the teens that work with the library help come up with all these different programs you see on this slide here, we're also taking it a step further. We have paid internships that we have actually posted right now that we're hoping that teens will apply for to help us design their space in the upper level of the Central Library. We have been meeting with many donors on Library Plaza, and while they're not always keen on that project, we were lucky enough to find a donor who gave us $100,000 this year to begin the design work for our teen space and upper level renovations. So while this project is not fully funded, we do have a little bit of seed money to move it forward. Next slide, please. Now I'll just start going over a few of our FY22 performance measures. Next slide, please. One of the performance measures that I have been responsible for the last few years is working with the County of Santa Barbara to review the governance and finance of that county library system. As you know, it is one unique library system. It is different than any other in the state of California. I wanted to provide the council with a few updates on where the direction is going in those conversations. So they are looking to have an update to the library agreement, the one that we take to council annually. And the key highlights that they're looking to include is a cap on the admin fee and allocated costs at 25%. And if that cap were to happen, that would mean that the library would need to reduce their fees that they charge the county libraries by $57,000 today. So we are not receiving full cost recovery for the management of those county libraries, and this will diminish that cost recovery even further. But the agreement is looking to clarify roles and timelines and funding. So we will know who the money's coming from and when we should get it in a much more clear and transparent way. They also are looking to include a CPI increase in the county agreement. They are building it in so that all county libraries receive the CPI and are creating a metric for city libraries. So if you continue funding at the same level or increase funding, then the city libraries could be eligible for the CPI increase of the county per capita as well. As you may recall, the county per capita to date is $7.80. We received that for each person within the city of Santa Barbara from the county, and it has been $7.80 for at least the last 5 to 6 years. The governance piece of this work is looking at a possible joint powers authority, or even bringing on a county librarian to help coordinate county libraries, or perhaps even a hybrid model where some are part of a JPA and the county librarian is overseeing different pieces. The governance piece is a little more fluid. They haven't really made too many determinations for where they're going. They're still doing a lot of research. But as Ms. Wetta described when going over the collections piece, the impacts to us when county libraries split off and become new zone libraries, such as in Goleta, and now looking forward to July 1st, 2022, with the Carpinteria Library looking to become Zone 5, how we lose the funding, lose the economics of scale, but continue to serve these areas. So we'll be watching very closely as Carpinteria looks to create its own library. And to that, a future review of the per capita allocation and zone boundary is really needed. The county at this time is not interested in reviewing these boundaries, but it would be my suggestion that we do take a look at this. As you can see, the impacts fiscally to the central library are pretty astounding. Next slide, please. Now, Library on the Go van, this is something we're very much looking forward to. It is state-of-the-art outreach vehicle. It has electric power, so when we stop at places, there will not be a smelly generator. It will be, the Volta system will power everything from air conditioning to 20 different laptop computers. It is built to support resiliency and during emergencies, so entire communities can come and log on to our internet. They can charge their devices by coming out to our van. It is going to allow staff to take library services, collections, and programs throughout our service area. So it's really, we're treating this like our new branch library. This van is going to reach areas that have so far not seen library services from us. It was funded by the Women's Fund and other private donations, and looking forward to regular stops at schools, parks, housing authority, and other partner locations, as well as pop-up events. We are getting many, many phone calls, everywhere from shelters to preschools. We will be very busy with this van, so we're very excited about that. Next slide, please. And with that, I'll hand it over to Ms. Wada to go over our Stay and Play expansion.
All right, so as you'll recall, the Stay and Play program was piloted in 2018 through 2020 and funded by a Packard grant. And this is an innovative model for delivering early literacy education and also caregiver support, targeting informal caregivers. And so we were part of 6 libraries who really developed this model, combining early learning skills, but also caregiver support and building those connections to community resources, which is really crucial as the friends, family, and neighbor caregivers are the primary responsible parties for the care of children ages 0 to 5. And this is even more true today as many parents have struggled to piece together childcare during the pandemic. So we developed this program and implemented it with phenomenal success over at Eastside, really reaching our target audience and bringing in new library users for this more informal story time over a 2-hour period instead of a traditional 30-minute story time. And then we were able to expand this to a site at Harding Elementary, which was a unique opportunity to bring our early literacy library services to the west side, where we don't have a library location. Next slide, please. So we had a new grant that we received that is funding this work through March 2022. That includes funding for a 32-hour-a-week position, as well as 15 hours of weekly hourly staff support to implement this project. And as you can imagine, we've had to pivot a lot of the models over the last year and how we were able to deliver these services. And as Ms. Cadiente mentioned, the youth services staff use story walks and preschool activity kits to deliver these services in a unique way during the pandemic. This also led to us collaborating with the team working to design a new outdoor learning space at Harding Elementary that's going to become the standard for the district. And so this is going to include the Stay and Play curriculum, and we're looking forward to continuing that partnership and really expanding this model throughout our community. An additional component that we were able to add because of this grant funding was caregiver classes, and these focus on school readiness, early literacy, and health and wellness topics. And we've been hosting these virtually in English and Spanish during the pandemic with great success, reaching these, sometimes new caregivers who weren't previously caring for young children, now looking to improve their skills. And another component of this is that we have classes on becoming a certified child care provider or maintaining your certification, as well as developing a business plan if you're looking into this new option, as the skills required to care for early learners is sometimes quite different from running a successful business. And as we all know, if anybody who has tried to find, daycare for children under the age of 5 in Santa Barbara, there is a real lack of licensed childcare facilities. And so we're hoping that this not only will increase the skills and capacity of caregivers, but also help increase the number of spots in licensed facilities for parents. Next slide, please. Spanish outreach. So over the last several years, libraries really prioritize hiring Spanish speakers for positions at all levels. And we can now say that 10 of our staff and a third of our frontline staff and 2 supervisors are all Spanish speaking. And this led to the formation of a Spanish outreach team, which meets bi-weekly to really look at what are the needs of our Spanish speaking community and how can we better serve them. Some of the projects that have come out of this have been a dedicated phone line in Spanish and an email, as well as a Spanish newsletter and social media presence on Facebook. And now we're ready to take that to the next level over this next fiscal year, especially as we're able to hopefully begin meeting with people in small groups, outdoors, to really get a sense of what is needed in these focus groups and conduct a needs assessment for our Spanish speaking community. Next slide, please. This is very much related to our East Side neighborhood needs assessment. As you'll recall, we reopened a renovated neighborhood library over on the East Side in early 22 and only got to use it for a few weeks before that building was closed due to COVID-19. But we're excited to get back to this and really hold some community conversations on the East Side and really engage with the local residents to determine what their priorities are for library programs and services, but also connect with the partners to improve coordination and leverage the community assets and really just help support the East Side being a vibrant neighborhood. Next slide, please. Our East Side Business Resource Classes. So this has been something that we piloted and only hope to continue to expand. So the library has 2 databases that help business owners or entrepreneurs and our resources for helping build marketing or business plans that have been used to great success. And so we're going to be continuing to partner and expand our partnership with Women's Economic Ventures to offer classes in English and Spanish, as well as one-on-one consultations with people looking to use these resources to help support their business growth. Next slide, please. Improve the functionality of the catalog. So you'll recall that we came back in late 2020 with a proposal to implement a new integrated library system for Santa Barbara Public Library. Our staff researched and vetted many solutions and came up with a proposal. And the direction was to continue to work collaboratively with the Black Gold Library and our neighboring jurisdictions to really come to a solution that satisfied all of our needs and addressed the challenges that we had with our current functionality, as well as continue to allow for resource sharing, but was still fiscally responsible. And I'm happy to say that we have figured out a way to do that. And so we're beginning that work and the preparation for that, and it'll be one of our major initiatives over the next fiscal year to move forward with this new catalog that will increase efficiencies and improve the user experience. Next slide, please. The Digitization Project. So SBPL holds the only copies of several early Santa Barbara area newspapers on microfilm. And these collections are in high demand, both locally and more widely. We get requests from all over the world to look up articles and resources on Santa Barbara's history. And so we've long been looking for a way to increase the accessibility of these collections by digitizing them. And we finally come up with a solution that is going to allow us to digitize everything through 1966 and make them accessible for free, not only to SBPL patrons, as well as being available in the UC system at a special collections library focused on local history. So this is a unique opportunity and partnership to really improve access to these historical newspapers. And our next steps are going to be working with the Santa Barbara News Press for the content that is still under copyright. We really want to have a digital solution for that, as well as it's some of the most requested content here locally. We want something that will allow for indexing and searching. So that'll be a project that we'll be looking forward to. Next slide, please. And I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Hernandez to discuss the remainder of our P3s.
Thank you, Ms. Weta. I will take over with the final two P3s. So the next in line is our technology assessment and plan. So the library needs critical infrastructure upgrades to maintain wireless internet access, especially now our community relies on us to provide internet access, Wi-Fi, and access to devices. We also, our public access computers need long-term funding for replacement. So we will be taking a deeper look and doing an assessment on all of our technology needs and putting together a strategic plan for technology to address these needs over the next few years. We're also currently excited about a proposal that is in the California Senate, which provides $1 billion in funding to California libraries for facility upgrades, technology, infrastructure, modernization. The proposal is called Build Back Boldly. And we have currently provided our needs for all of our library locations for infrastructure and technology. We've provided this information to the state library and to Santa Barbara County in hopes that we will receive some of this funding from Build Back Boldly. And as well, the city can also communicate needs to the California State Library to support the allocation of these funds. Next slide, please. And we have a performance measure for equity, diversity, and inclusion. We're really excited. The library formed an internal team called EDIT, the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion team. And our team is currently working with a facilitator to get a plan in place as we begin evaluating our library policies, our programs, taking a closer look at our collections, and really looking at all of these with an EDI lens and to be more inclusive for everyone in our community. Some current projects that we have underway is our no address required library card. So generally, in order to get a library card, a patron has to show proof of current residence address. Well, in order to make materials more accessible to everyone, we will have a special card that allows for materials to be checked out, but you will not have to show your actual physical address to obtain this library card. Another project that we have underway is our diversity collection audit. And this is looking at all of the materials that we acquire and that we already have in our collection and making sure that those materials really reflect the diversity in our community as well. Also, as part of our equity, diversity, and inclusion, we are big on staff trainings. We really want to equip our staff and give them the tools needed to be able to effectively serve everybody in our community. So listed are some of the trainings that we've taken. Pacific Pride did a training for us on LGBTQ 101. The Kegel Autism Center had someone come and do a training for us on serving patrons on the autism spectrum. Project Ready. This is a curriculum that promotes equity and access for youth. And it's exciting that our entire youth services team, as well as our edit team, is working through the Project Ready curriculum. And the goal is to have all of our library staff work through this curriculum as well. We've had cultural humility training for tutors and for our staff. And then also really exciting is we have library staff participating with equity in summer reading, which is a statewide task force. And at the end of the task force, there will be a toolkit and learning materials that will be made available to all libraries throughout California. So we are really excited about our upcoming EDI work that we will be doing. Next slide, please. And just wanted to say thank you. This concludes our budget presentation. We appreciate your time and listening to us, and we will open it up for any questions.
Very good. We'll take questions from the city council and then we'll go to public comment. Mr. Friedman, kicking us off with questions, please.
Great, thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Weta, Ms. Hernandez, and Director Cadiente for the library. This is my, you know, I love the library and just, it's so great, all the work that you're doing. I'll save comments for later. But I do have a few questions. The first question is, I noticed in some of the performance metrics that there was a reduction in like visits. Is that because the anticipation is going to 5 days a week? I assume that's what that is. If you're looking at like page G197 or G200, just wanted to check on that unless there was something that I was missing.
Ms. Sweta, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Yes, that is in anticipation of the reduced number of hours that we are open to the public, just impacting the number of people who walk through our doors as well.
Okay, and then in line with that, on G197, I was just looking, and it's going to lead into another question, and it has to do with social services, but the number of 911 or police dispatch calls and incidents violations logged is a pretty significant reduction. Is there anything else that you're anticipating that's going to drive that down, or again, for example, for the public who hadn't seen it, in the fiscal year 20, you had 60 911 calls and you're going down to 25 is what you're projecting. So that's more than the 25% reduction in hours. So I just want to see, is there something else that you're proactively doing to drive that down, or is that just what you're anticipating with the reduced hours?
Thank you. I can take that. We are hoping with staff training. We also have security on board now who helps out with the outside of the library. So we're hoping to intervene before incidents escalate and then really reduce those 911 calls.
Great. So we are taking proactive measures as well. And then in terms of prior, what amount of staff time, if this is prior to the pandemic, would you anticipate went to dealing with social services? I know you said in library board meetings before, but could you give us an understanding of the percentage of your staff time that is relevant to this?
Yeah, I'll let Ms. Sweta fill in the gaps on this one as well. However, I will say that at the peak, we would estimate that 30% of all staff time on the floor is being rerouted to deal with the situation. 10 to 15% of the people coming into the central library are people who are experiencing homelessness. We spend a lot more time with them than a patron who might just be coming in to get a hold. Ms. Sweta, do you have something to add?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct in that this population represents, the 10 to 15% of the people coming through our doors, but a number of the people who come into the library are picking up their holds or browsing the stacks and don't require a high level of staff support, while this population, whether it's because of challenging behaviors that we need to address with our rules of conduct or because they just need additional services, staff are spending more and more time with these individuals, because a lot of the people who are experiencing homelessness that use the library you wouldn't know it to look at them, that they don't have behavior issues. They are not having mental illness crises that erupt or things of that nature. They just need more access to services and care, more intervention from staff to support and connect them with resources, or to help them use the library resources, more assistance using the technology, accessing the computers, more intervention on that nature. So we're serving them in a lot of different ways, a lot of different populations. We help families in the children's library who may be in a shelter situation or maybe on the verge of a shelter situation, refer them. I mean, just last week at the Eastside Library, when they've been opened, our Spanish-speaking staff were helping someone navigate a situation like that. So it's all forms of services, not just the 911 call type situations.
Thank you for that clarification. I think it's important to know all the work that you're doing, all the programming that we're doing helps that. I just have two more questions. The first, going into the Teen Center project, you said that there is a $100,000 anonymous donation, and that will get us part of the way to the design. Do you have an estimate on what it would cost to do the full design?
Yeah, I think Councilmember Friedman, Mayor Murillo, I believe that the full design will cost between $200,000 and $250,000.
And that's counting with the 100. So yes, if we wanted to budget that, we would be looking at it somewhere in that ballpark for another 100 to 150 if we wanted to move forward with the Teen Center. I think that'd be a great partnership. So
that's correct.
And my last question is in regards to City of Goleta. I'll just say it's a little concerning that then when they reduce their hoopla, because you're saying that there's a cost per charge, so they reduce theirs and we see an uptick. So and there's some other challenges there that with their library. To what extent have we engaged them directly from us to them, their administration to our administration, to really try to work with them to come out with these issues? Because I think there's the one issue, the county per capita, but if there was a way for us to engage directly with Goleta to come up with a solution that we could bring to the county, I think it would be more than each of us lobbying the county directly. So are we engaging with them on issues, especially like this, where they reduce services and pass them on to us, or based on what the data was presented today? And can we continue to do, are we going to continue to do that?
Mayor Murillo, Councilmember Friedman, we absolutely have engaged with the City of Goleta. We have met with their administrative team and emphasized the need for them to enhance their digital collections. You know, the City of Goleta is really focused on getting their physical collections up to where they need to be, as they're, you know, a net borrower throughout Black Gold. And so that's where they've been focusing on, and we do thank them for doing that work. We did emphasize to them that the digital use is where we can really use their support in enhancing what they're currently doing. We'll continue to have those conversations with them, but it's challenging in that the users of the library don't really understand this change and what happened. All they saw was that they now have access to less when they're with Goleta. So of course they just come back. So we do need to continue working with them for them to enhance those budgets. But it was after those conversations that they reduced the hoopla number.
Oh, interesting. It was after those conversations that they reduced it.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you. No questions.
Thank you.
And thanks for your time, and thanks for a great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Friedman. Ms. Nedden, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have so many comments that I'm going to refrain from. I'll just ask questions now, but I do have to say, you three are such a power team. Every year I think, what could you possibly do more than what you're doing? And you come up with new inventive ways to serve the community. And it's incredible. It's really incredible every year. But I'll start with questions and I'll save the rest of the comments for later. But let's see, page G195. And I'm just trying to understand this part. So it has the hourly employees just as 0 all the way across. So, but then I saw an ad, I thought, for now hiring hourlies at the library. So that I'm confused about that. And then if there is the authorized positions, if you could help me understand, is a new position being created or lost? It goes up to the amended, is it 5, and then projected? I don't know. If you could help me understand that part.
Ms. Hernandez, do you want to speak to the budget pages?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you, Mayor Murillo, Council Members Fenn. Yes, our budget pages vary slightly from our actual presentation here. We do actually have hourly hours and an hourly budget, and are actively recruiting right now for hourly positions, which is great. We did have to make a reduction in our hourly hours budget for next year to meet those targeted reductions, but we actually do have hourly employees and do have a budget for that as well. And for the other question was for our full-time positions, we actually are recommending the addition of a senior librarian position. We are lacking a supervisory position in that area over adult services. So we are attempting to get an additional senior librarian as well, and to have an additional 0.8 permanent library technician as well for more assistance.
Okay, thank you. That clears that up. And I think I mean, I might as well just say it now that I'm hoping, you know, when we lost our downtown parking kiosk workers, and then there was sort of the idea that maybe as the library reopened up, the library could be rehiring some hourlies, and that might balance out. So I'm just going to ask, I guess, not for you to keep track, but I think maybe Mr. Casey, I don't know, to keep track of the balance of hourlies as they do start to come back, something to watch. So then I guess I have another on C14, the library admin costs, and it looks like it goes up from like around 406,000 to 709,000. Like it nearly doubles. And I'm just, if you could just like holistically, you know, we've talked about all the individual pieces, but what is the largest factor in that? Or
What page are you on, Ms. Niddon?
that was page C14 at the beginning document, not in the library section, but in the overall view.
Thank you, Mayor Murillo and Councilmember Sneddon. Again, our pages differ from our presentation. We really tried to call out specific costs. So just to give you an idea, the library admin fee is our fee for managing the county libraries. And that is around $170,000. And so the county per capita is also funding that is received based on our service population, and that population is increasing next year, and so that we will receive some additional revenue for that as well.
So I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. I think that answers that it's because of this issue really with county and the changing and the boundaries and all of these going independent, that those administrative fees are really almost doubling for us. Okay, that's significant.
Mayor Murillo, Councilmember Sneddon, if I could interject, the administrative costs are not doubling. I do believe that the budget pages may not reflect the actual numbers. Is that correct, Ms. Hernandez? That the $709,000, I'm not sure is a correct number.
That is not correct.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think that's the issue. It will be FY23 will be more in line with what you see in FY22 of 406,659. You'll see a slight increase most likely, but that number as printed, I do believe is not correct.
Well, that's a relief. that was causing me some. I couldn't understand what it was that was doing that. Yeah.
We will clarify and get that correct number.
Mr. Bodett, you had something to add?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Sneddon, I can answer that question on C14 for you, Ms. Sneddon. So it appears as though there's like it doubles, but what happened is there's some planned savings that the department plans on achieving next year by holding positions vacant. And that number reflects the planned reductions in savings. So the budget reflects the fact that they're going to hold position opens and achieve savings. So that's why it's reflected differently there.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And then just one more question. I guess I'll save the rest for comments. But so an embedded social worker or help with point of entry. And this is something I've advocated for years. And I think it's, I guess, unfortunate that the time has really come that it seems so necessary. And my question is, what is it going to take? Would it be one position? Would it be there all hours that you're open? Would it be ideally, I mean, I'm thinking, is it funded by county wellness? And maybe that could be part of the agreement making with the county. Like, you know, we're having all of this shifting around and maybe it's not a monetary trade, but maybe it's like, could you please embed a social worker here? And that might help take care of some of the inequity and hoopla or whatever else is happening. And if you could just, I think we really need to know what that cost is or what that need is, because I think it's just so important that you have it.
Thank you, Mayor Murillo. Councilmember Sneddon, I'll go ahead and start, and I believe Ms. White will most likely have something to add as well. So our thoughts for the library is that as Ms. What demonstrated in the presentation, there are many, many libraries throughout this country that we can look to so that we do not have to recreate the wheel. The one that has been most successful for now over a decade is in San Francisco, where they have a social worker from the county of San Francisco working at the library, reporting to library management, and then that social worker then might have a cadre or team of paid interns, of people who were formerly homeless individuals to support the work in the library. We anticipate this kind of position at the library would not just support the library, but this entire downtown area. It's not as if somebody's going to be sitting in an office waiting for people to come to them. There's opportunities throughout the garages surrounding the library, the Museum of Art, and just this entire downtown space is what we would hope to help coordinate that entry with. Ms. Weta, anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're really open to working with our partners at the county to figure out the best possible solution. And I think that conversation needs to be ongoing. As far as the costs for this, if you look at the county's position control and their salary ranges, there's a social services worker and a social services practitioner. And so the cost for that is somewhere between $56,000 and $82,000 salary, and then plus benefits for a year. So I think that's one place to start. But as Ms. Caliente noted, we really see success when the library team is able to work directly with this person to achieve our vision. And I think that that's been really critical to the success of our security in the library, and that we definitely want to address people's concerns, their challenges, and challenging behavior like with security, but without penalizing people who are normally using the library, or without policing the use of the library for people who aren't interfering with others' needs. And so it's been really important for us to help strike that balance so that the library is a welcoming space for all, because that's absolutely what we're committed to. And so with the social worker, we would hope to be able to work collaboratively with them to kind of help integrate them into the library service as a whole, so that they're working with library staff and our neighbors working outside of our building, working, that downtown corridor in order to provide connections to services. And then is somebody who's trained beyond what library staff are trained to in the event that there is a more critical situation at the library.
Thank you, Ms. Weta, and thank you also for your, participation with the RAP meetings and with SB Act, and it's really working on that holistic solution to that. It's really, I just want to ask that you're very clear with your ask to us of what you need, so that it's not ambiguous and doesn't happen. So that would be my one big ask of you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Well, I did have a follow-up to the hourlies question. I understood that the pages who were hourly and were let go because of pandemic, that they would be hired back. Mr. Casey, do you have something on that or something else?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members, and I'll let the library staff speak specifically to the pages, but it's our citywide policy working through our HR department that any hourlies that we need to let go at the beginning of the pandemic, as we rehire them, we will offer them the opportunity to apply first as well and re-get their jobs. It's good for the city to bring them back because we've trained them, we've invested in them, they know their job and work, and so they can hit the ground running. So if they're still interested in coming back a year later, things often change, but if they're around and interested in coming back, we are absolutely reaching out to them first. And I'll let the library staff speak specifically to the pages, but that runs across all the different departments that we had hourly staff.
Thank you. Is there anything else to add on that?
Madam Mayor, we have brought back some of our hourly staff, but as you can see in the reflected budget, we don't have the ability to bring back full capacity hourlies that we had pre-pandemic. And so we are, as we're looking forward to opening the library, we're opening the hourly positions that we can budget for, which is greatly reduced. I believe we had close to 37 hourlies pre-pandemic, and at Central Library now, I believe with our hires, we'll have 3 library technicians and then 6 pages. So definitely a reduction.
Yes, that is correct. And I'd just like to add that some of the hourly positions we're currently recruiting for are grant funded. Both the adult education and the youth services for stay and play are funded by grants specifically for that purpose. So we are recruiting for a regular patron services library technician to get that number up to 3. We currently only have 1. We promoted 1 that we had brought back as an hourly to a full-time position that we had come up vacant. And then pages we're also going to be recruiting for as well.
Thank you, Ms. Weta. And Mayor Murillo, I just would like to add to that we're really focusing on trying to build up our full-time team right now, and then the future to looking to the hourly staff.
Understood. Well, I will continue asking my questions. I don't see other council members popping on. The student success cards that were for the Santa Barbara Unified School students, well, how is that working? But that was started during pandemic or before? I'm trying to remember.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We had we're going through all the logistics. It took us about 1.5 years of working with the school district to get that card finalized. Luckily, we had it finalized just as the pandemic hit, and we successfully put out just over 11,000 student success cards for this school year. So it's a very easy transition for parents to just check the box, and their children's student ID becomes a library card. So, but more work needs to happen in terms of our support of the school district and helping them develop their digital assets as well.
Well, I had a question on digital. I know that the Eastside Library has the largest collection of Spanish language material. Is there the same demand for Spanish language digital? Is that about the same in English and Spanish?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I can answer that. We're just beginning to build our Spanish digital collection. That is something that Black Gold hadn't been investing in just because of a, perceived lack of use and ability to promote that. But over the last couple of years, we have been slowly building up that Spanish language collection and are seeing it being used in all areas across nonfiction and popular reading materials. And we have a selector who's really got his pulse on, or his thumb on the pulse of that community and really had success with, we have a Spanish language book club at the library as well that reads titles in Spanish. And so we're hoping to grow that, especially our children's collections. We do invest more in those than in adults for Spanish language, and that's primarily at the Eastside Library to support the Adelante School, which uses Eastside as its school library, and then with the addition of the new charter school that will be Spanish language immersion as well over the years, anticipating more demand for especially the early elementary Spanish language titles, and we've kind of accounted for that. Additionally, we purchased special collections for the Library on the Go outreach vehicle, knowing that we would want to target our Spanish language community with that. And so a significant portion of the new materials that we bought out of the collection budget for that are in Spanish, both children and adult.
Okay, and then the last question I had was about resolving the issue of non-city residents being so active with our collections. But then I see we also have a policy of that people don't have to tell us what their street address is. So I guess we're okay, right? Being a source of information for people, or would we ask the county to give us more support? Would that be the way to balance out that demand, that value, I guess?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First, on the new no address verification card that we're looking at launching, that'll have limited use. So it'll be similar to the student success card, and instead of 99 items, you can check out 3 physical items. And that's really going to be promoted to the target population that asks for it. So I don't see that being a significant issue in regards to the out of library zone card holders. And the issue is in the state of California, anybody who visits in person at any public library can get a library card from that jurisdiction. Now, because we share a catalog with the other Black Gold libraries, you can't have a card for both Goleta and Santa Barbara, which is often what people ask for. They want both, they want it all. They don't understand kind of how we're connected in the system. And the real issue is that people who have wanted to switch back there's always going to be that kind of people move and don't update their, you know, preferred branch in the library card system, and that's all normal. It's the people who we did the work to convert to Goleta Valley cards when they left our jurisdiction that we're often converting back to Santa Barbara Public Library cards. And we absolutely don't want to penalize those individuals because it's not necessarily like they don't understand the wider issue. It is a county governance issue, and looking at where those zone boundaries are. As I mentioned, there's a significant portion in 2 zip codes that cross between the county area and the Santa Barbara city limits, have a lot of card holders. So that's not really clear. And then additional funding would definitely be something to ask for based on use. Like we have many more card holders as a whole compared to zone 4, even though technically we're supposed to serve a similar size populations and receive similar size funding from the county in that regard.
Well, it's a delicate matter, and I know that we're working on it and trying to be a good neighbor and a good library system for everybody, but also trying to make sure that everybody pays their fair share in a free library system. So, okay, but no comments at this point. We're still on question, and if I don't see another council member pop onto the screen here, there's Mr. Gutierrez, Mayor Pro Tem Gutierrez, and then we'll go to public comment sooner or later. Mr. Gutierrez, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just was hoping that you could reiterate your effort on the west side. I believe you stated that you were going to have a kind of like a satellite location at Harding School. Is that right?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Gutierrez. So we have been holding, prior to the pandemic, we were holding regular stay and play classes on the Harding campus in partnership with them, as well as English language immersion classes for those really in response to community need and in our partnership with those school districts, as well as expanding on that partnership. We're also looking to target areas where we don't have community libraries with library on the go outreach visits. So we've identified a few sites for stops there as well to really target the families on that area, because we know that it's not so much further geographically, but like that highway just is a barrier for people on the west side coming over to use the central library. So we're absolutely targeting that neighborhood.
And is that also going to be a location where the residents could check out equipment or technology? Like I saw that you're able to check out laptops and tablets and iPads and such. Are they going to be able to do that at those locations as well?
Absolutely. The library on the go will be a holds pickup location that you can choose in the catalog to pick up any materials, as well as the library on the go outreach van is equipped with laptops and is an internet hotspot that can support many devices when it's deployed at a site. So they'll be able to access our circulating collection, as well as just a kind of a pop-up computer lab.
And that brings me to my other question. Do you feel that you have enough adequate resources to address the digital divide, or would you feel like you would need more? Or
there are several funding opportunities right now. One of the silver linings, I think, of the pandemic has been an influx of funding. As Ms. Hernandez mentioned, there's that Building Back Boldly proposal in the Senate that is specifically for infrastructure needs, technology needs, including circulating devices. So increasing the number of hotspots and laptops that we are able to loan out to the community, which we've more than doubled over the last year, but we still, there's an increase in demand and need for those as well. So that funding would definitely be something we'd be looking to take advantage of. We're really only limited by staff's capacity to manage that circulating collection, because there's, some troubleshooting and technology on the back end. It's not just devices. Like there's a limit to increase that you can have and still manage with existing staff resources and staff time. But absolutely, we're looking to take advantage of those funding opportunities.
Well,
I
I
will
think.
just-
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Gutierrez. I will just piggyback on that all of these devices that we offer for support, both in the library and with our Library on the Go van, they will have an end of life. And so that is a big piece of our technology strategic plan that we will be working on, is really assessing what an actual full cost, a recovery plan and replacement plan looks like for all of these devices, and as we investigate different ways to fund them.
Well, I really appreciate the library taking on that task, because I know from my residents that one of the things that they voice is a lack of access to technology and the ability to communicate via the internet. So I really appreciate it. My residents appreciate it as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Gutierrez. Any other questions from the council? Let's see if there are folks who want to make public comment. Mr. Stow, are you still there? And is anyone raising their hand in the GoToWebinar audience?
Yes, Madam Mayor. It presently looks like we have approximately 10 individuals who would like to speak. And our first speaker will be Barbara Hirschberg, followed by Milt Hess, Jim Stern, Ann Howard, and E. Howard Green. And our first speaker, Barbara Hirschberg, I have unmuted you, and you may begin with your comment, please.
Good afternoon. This is Barbara Cronin Hirschberg, president of Santa Barbara Friends of the Library. When I was in elementary school growing up in San Francisco, the library was a place to check out books, read in a quiet setting, and do my homework. Today, the library is so much more than that. It's a true gem in our community, offering services to everyone from the preschooler to the retired population. I put together a list of 10 reasons to support the library budget as generously as possible, but you know there are more than that. Number one, the grab and go program, where you can request books and go in and pick them up. 2, adult literacy program. 3, the summer reading program. 4, story walks in the park. 5, downloads, streamings, and hotspot checkouts. 6, caregiver classes. 7, Santa Barbara Public Library Works. 8, Vets Now, Job Now. 9, OG Reader Program for struggling readers. In fact, I'm just doing the training for that, and it's absolutely phenomenal. It's a great program. And 10, Library on the Go. Looking forward to that coming out this summer. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Ms. Hirschberg. Next speaker, please.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Our next speaker is Milt Hess. And Milt Hess, I have unmuted you, and you may begin your comment, please.
Thank you. Mayor Murillo and members of City Council, good afternoon. My name is Milt Hess, and I'm chair of the Library Board and also the city's representative on the County Library Advisory Committee. During my first year on the Library Board, I read a book that introduced me to the socio-cultural concept of the third space, and it's shaped my thinking ever since. The first space is where we live, and the second space is where we work. The third space is where we go to be part of our community. It may be a coffee shop or a tavern. In Europe, it's traditionally been the piazza, the public square. And under the leadership of Director Cariente, our public library has evolved into Santa Barbara's third space, where we go to be part of our community. The library has developed programs for almost every demographic slice of our population: children, language learners, job seekers, poetry lovers, book groups. The list goes on. I spoke to you last week about one group that the library staff is not trained or qualified to serve: the homeless folks who have made the library their third space. They need services that only trained professional social workers can provide. So I encourage you to provide funding in the library's budget to offer the support that these individuals need and deserve. And I have a second issue I'd like to raise with you, and that is the inequities in the county library system, specifically between the Santa Barbara and Goleta libraries. An analysis that I prepared over a year ago quantified the disparities in two dimensions. First, the disproportionate use of Santa Barbara's library by Zone 4 residents. And second, the disproportionate population assigned to the two zones for the county's per capita allocation. I briefed Supervisors Williams, Hart, and Hartman, and the Goleta librarian, as well as our own council members, on the results of the analysis. Yet, the situation persists. We need to generate movement on the issue, and I propose that renegotiating the agreement with the county for the next year seems like a good place to start. So, in summary, I encourage you to support professional social workers for the homeless who make the library their third space. And I encourage you to use the next contract with the county to address the inequities between Zone 1 and Zone 4. And I thank you very much.
You're right on 3 minutes. Perfect. I am keeping track, by the way, folks. So thank you, Mr. Hess. Next speaker, please.
Yes, Madam Mayor, our next speaker will be Jim Stern, followed by Ann Howard and E. Howard Green. And Jim Stern, you have been unmuted, and you may unmute yourself and begin your comment, please.
Thank you very much. Madam Mayor and members of council, my name is Jim Stern. I'm on the board of the Santa Barbara Public Library Foundation. We had left the ale house where first we met and hired a room to hold our club in. I proposed that we should all of us bring our books to that room where they would not only be ready to consult in our conferences, but become a common benefit, each of us being at liberty to borrow as such as he wished to read at home. This was accordingly done, and for some time contented us. Benjamin Franklin, age 24. The libraries of America are and must ever remain the home of free and inquiring minds. To them, our citizens of all ages and races, of all creeds and persuasions, must be able to turn with clear confidence that they can freely seek the whole truth, unvarnished by fashion and uncompromised by expediency. President Dwight D. Eisenhower. Google can bring you back 100,000 answers. A librarian can bring you back the right one. Neil Gaiman. No libraries, no progress. Willard Scott. Libraries store the energy that fuels the imagination. They open up windows to the world and inspire us to explore and achieve and contribute to improving our quality of life. Libraries change lives for the better. Sidney Sheldon. I have found the most valuable thing in my wallet is my library card. Laura Bush. Cutting libraries during a recession is like cutting hospitals during a plague. Eleanor Crumbleham. Whatever the cost of our libraries, the price is cheap compared to that of an ignorant nation. Walter Cronkite. Now, when I read constantly about the way in which library funds are being cut and cut, I can only think that the door is closing and that American society has found one more way to destroy itself. Isaac Asimov. And finally, the health of our civilization, the depth of our awareness about the underpinnings of our culture, and our concern for the future can all be tested by how well we support our libraries. Carl Sagan. Madam Mayor and members of council, thank you for this opportunity and for your attention.
Thanks, Mr. Stern. Next speaker, please.
Yes, Madam Mayor, our next speaker will be Ann Howard, followed by E. Howard Green. And Ann Howard, you have been unmuted and you may unmute yourself and begin your comment, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, City Council members. My name is Ann Howard. I'm the board president of the Santa Barbara Public Library Foundation. It's always an honor and it's a lot of fun to speak at City Hall, Zoom at City Hall. On behalf of our library and our amazing team, as Councilmember Sneddon said, our power team of librarians led by Library Director Jessica Cariente, I would say today we saw Wonder Woman ×3. Today, I want to say a quick word of support in establishing a professional staff person to address social service issues. You're aware of the issue of homelessness, of course, in our community and the strain that this puts on our library staff. The staff now stretched so far by these new budget cuts. Our public library is a trusted place, as are all libraries where all are welcome and all have the opportunity to pursue happiness, as it says in our Declaration of Independence. That is, to seek to better their lives. Often that pursuit of happiness means connecting to critical local resources. Because of this, libraries across California and the nation, we've just heard, are now having social workers at the library. One example from Chicago shows that the social workers identify individuals lacking a medical home and provide primary care referrals. They assess individuals for behavioral health and substance abuse issues and provide referrals. They identify individual needs such as housing, food insecurity, employment, et cetera, and provide referrals. And so they reduce staff calls to city police departments and decrease the percent of in-library disturbances. This is not a new trend, but it's become a proven and cost-effective way to address a serious community problem. We know Santa Barbara has a problem, the whole community, not just the library. The library stands at the front line. We need a social worker. We need to catch up. One last point, as the foundation carries forward the capital campaign to build the new library plaza, we hear two consistent questions from potential donors. One, is the city committed to the new plaza? And we're happy to point to the city's initial $1.615 million investment in the project. And question number two, what is the city doing about homelessness? Donors are pleased to be part of the public-private partnership with the city to improve our downtown. And I can report to you, it will go a long, long way to encourage potential donors and our neighbors and all of our patrons to know that the city is willing to strengthen this public-private partnership by committing to a social worker at the library. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Howard. Thanks. Next speaker.
Yes, Madam Mayor, 6 individuals have indicated they would like to speak. Our next speaker will be E. Howard Green, followed by Barbara Anderson and Jim Jackson. And E. Howard Green, I have unmuted you, and you may unmute yourself and begin your comment, please.
I think you can hear me. Would somebody raise their hand
Yes.
or wave something?
We can hear you.
Thank you. I am impressed with the breadth and depth of the library's activities. I had some experience a few years ago in another community with the Bookmobile, was the name for the van that you've talked about. Interesting that as you proceed on the planning on this, it would be very useful to publicly discuss where the van might be, for how long, time of day, and how many hours the battery will hold before it has to go back to the garage. So those are just future items, but it's a fascinating concept. I hope that each of the districts in town get at least equal usage of it, availability of it. The other topic I have is related to the materials that you showed, and eventually the budget that will be submitted formally to the city. Where will these be publicly available? And I say that because I have previously raised the question for other presentations, been told the materials that were not available at the time the agenda was published would be added after the event. I have not seen that for a particular event, the State Street report that was made on March 9th. I can't find it. The slides, and though it's not library business, it is information retrieval business. So thank you very much. I'm off.
Thanks, Mr. Green. Send me an email about that. We'll find that report for you, and things should be put on the website for easy location. So thanks. Next speaker.
Yes, Madam Mayor, our next speaker is Barbara Anderson, followed by Jim Jackson. And Barbara Anderson, you have been unmuted and you may begin your comment, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm Barbara Anderson, the facilitator of the Act on Homelessness Collaborative, working to reduce the impacts of homelessness in the city of Santa Barbara. We fully recognize that the Santa Barbara Public Library provides critical resources to our underserved communities. And these resources are needed now more than ever, as hundreds of individuals and families are struggling financially due to the economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. The library has shared that on any given day prior to the COVID-19 shutdown of non-essential services, the library hosted 100 to 150 individuals experiencing homelessness per day. Some of these individuals are simply seeking refuge from the rain or the cold. Some are needing to use the restroom. Many others are needing to charge their devices or access computers so that they could complete important paperwork, schedule or follow up with an appointment, get updates on loved ones, or just be able to stay up on information, education about resources, and current news and events. We also know that many families that reside in their vehicles seek time in the library so that their children can read books, participate in library programs, and be on the computer to do their schoolwork or other projects. The library is important for their ongoing growth, development, as well as mental health and overall well-being. SB Act wants to wholeheartedly share our support for the proposal to add an on-site full-time social worker that would engage with our housing insecure and unhoused neighbors to be able to build a relationship with them, understand their needs, and connect them with resources. A few months ago, we met with the San Francisco Public Library to understand better their model and approach, as they were the first library in the country to have a full-time on-site social worker. Not only have they seen a very positive impact with the engagement of the social worker with individuals experiencing homelessness, but they've been able to expand that presence by hiring individuals currently experiencing homelessness to help this social worker identify individuals that may need support, that they can facilitate introductions with people they recognize, and also help with de-escalation with individuals that are struggling with mental health or substance abuse. We hope that you will consider this funding request for critical support to our unhoused neighbors. We know firsthand that if individuals are engaged in an environment that is safe for them by people they trust, they will be more successful in their pathway out of homelessness. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Ms. Anderson, before you go, may I pose a question to you? Because I had the thought when we started the conversation about the need for a social worker, would a CityNet outreach worker, they're trained, would that suffice for the position? And I would assume it would be maybe more cost effective. Are you still there, ma'am?
Yes, I am. And that is absolutely a possibility, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. We are looking at creative strategies and approaches to ensure that there is that capacity with the library. I think the first choice in terms of someone who can be on site, building those relationships and connecting individuals with resources as they reopen is the highest priority. And if there is possibility with case management and with CityNet and connection with our neighborhood navigation centers and regional action plans, that we are coordinating very closely with Ms. Caliente and her team to be able to facilitate what's best for them.
Okay, so maybe a recommendation is coming to us on this then. Okay, very good, thank you. Another speaker? Mr. Stowe.
Oh, yes, Madam Mayor. Our next speaker will be Jim Jackson, followed by Lauren Trujillo. And Jim Jackson, you have been unmuted and you may begin your comment, please.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Madam Secretary,
start again.
And am I fading out?
You were.
Okay, I'll try and I don't have the greatest connection today, unfortunately, so I'll try again. But anyway, the first thing I wanted to say was to thank you for your commitment to the library as a city and for recognizing its importance as a public resource. And you are looking at embarking on the process of making decisions about the city's resources and how to invest them. So as a financial person, I wanted to talk about that just and look at some history in investing in the library. 6 years ago, you made a significant investment in expanding the children's library. And the result of that was a 5-fold increase in the number of young people, young children who were attending the library. So think of that over the last 5 or 6 years, what that actually caused, the change in literacy, the change in education for that many people. That was a good investment. Now let's think about the current investment in the expansion and renovation of Library Plaza. I'm imagining in a couple of years, we're going to be looking back and seeing how different downtown is with the connection of the Patios and how the vibrancy of the city is different with festivals and things going on in open Library Plaza and the expansion of the different types of programming that the library will be able to do outside. So I'm thinking we're going to consider that a worthwhile investment as well. You can't rest on your laurels, and we, as somebody said, no good deed goes unpunished. So we have to think about how to take the library to the next level. What can we do different? And I think the discussion of the social worker is really important. I think about changing the trajectory of some of the people who are most at risk in our community, who come to the library as their last resource. They're on their last straw. And if there are ways to turn them around and get them pointed in the right direction, think about how that return on investment would feel in 4 or 5 years and the number of people we could actually help. So these are not investments in Bitcoin. These are not investments in GameStop or in NFTs. These are investments in people that have returns for people. So I think we need to think about it as this is a kind of return on investment that is the best, but it's not just a return on investment. It's a return on imagination. That we need to think about how to reimagine what downtown could be, what our library could be, and how it could be best for everyone. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate your comments. Another speaker?
Yes, Madam Mayor. 4 individuals have indicated they'd like to speak on this item. Lauren Trujillo, Marissa Miller, Mackenzie Wildman, and Margaret Croco. And Lauren Trujillo, you have been unmuted and you may begin with your comment, please.
Hi, good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. My name is Lauren Trujillo and I'm the Foundation Director of the Santa Barbara Public Library Foundation. Thank you for supporting our public library and recognizing the important services the library provides to fill gaps in our community. Your support for our public-private partnership helps to elevate our library and allows the library to reach more of our most vulnerable community members. While capital support in filling vacant library positions is much appreciated, the library operating budget must be a priority. I am here today to ask 2 things: that the city make no cuts to operating funds for the library, and that the city support the funding for a social worker. The library requires general fund dollars to keep the doors open and provide the growing services our community depends on. The city of Santa Barbara funds 78% of the city library operating budget, the county funds 12%, and the remaining 10% comes from grants and donations. This continued status quo budget is not sustainable. As you have seen in the presentation today, our library never stopped serving the community during COVID, with limited staff and a status quo budget. Continuing to limit the funds needed for operations has consequences that impact the community members that need the library's free services the most. To ensure the library has the tools and resources necessary to effectively serve the community, it is essential there are no additional cuts to the library's operating budget. Now is not the time to cut the funds that the library uses to steward our public realm. On the contrary, now is the time to invest in the ongoing management and refinement of our social infrastructure. In addition to operating budget support, the city of Santa Barbara can provide the community with recovery support by funding a necessary social worker position at the library. Our public library provides advice and connections to health, housing, literacy, and other services in our community, but is not a day center. A social worker will offer proactive work to remove people from homelessness or prevent people from becoming homeless in the first place, and follow a model practiced by libraries all over the country. Thank you for your continued support for the library, and thank you for reassessing these critical library budget needs. Thank you.
Speaker?
Madam Mayor, our next speaker is Marissa Miller. Marissa Miller, you have been unmuted and you may begin your comment, please. And Marissa, it looks like you may be unmute. Oh, I'm sorry, you may begin.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
My name's Marissa Miller. I'm actually not a representative of any organization. I'm just a citizen of the city. But I have been a lifelong library user from the 70s to today. I'm an educator. I was also program supervisor for AOK for 10 years. So I'm deeply aware of what the needs of our children are. I'm also currently a small business owner that uses the library resources to support my business. I want to point out, growing up in this town, I could buy a book on every block of downtown. I cannot do that today. It was a vibrant library that I grew up in, and I'm delighted to see that it's still a vibrant library. However, I do believe it's been cut to the bone in its current configuration. I support the council at minimum accepting the professionally crafted and deeply considered budget proposed today, but I also want to strongly urge the council to consider rescinding the cuts and reductions, or at least make them as small as possible in support of the collections, the staffing, and the operating budget. I believe looking forward this next 2 years, this city's mission is going to be trying to empower a resilient recovery from the pandemic impacts at every level of our town. The business people, the children, the seniors, the homeless, everybody is going to need to recover in a resilient way. And this library is our key tool or place to do that as a city, because we don't have to find all the constituencies. They're already tied in to our library. And so that's why I'd like to urge that you consider at least maintaining or even restoring funding so that in this time of crisis, the library can remain an oasis for fostering resiliency in every constituency of our town. Because every dollar spent will come back to us at multiple ways. And I thank you for your support of the library.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Speaker?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Our next speaker is Mackenzie Wildman. And Mackenzie Wildman, you have been unmuted and you may begin your comment, please.
Hello, good afternoon, Madam Mayor and the members of City Council. I'm Mackenzie Wildman, Vice Chair of the Library's Advisory Board. I'd like to comment in support of the Library Department's recommended budget. In these extraordinary times, our library has adapted to meet the needs of the community. The library closed its physical doors on March 14th, 2020. Within 3 days, the library was offering book bundles for kids for pickup. Within 4 days, story times were broadcast online. A year into the pandemic, the library continues as a pillar serving our community. As Director Caliente so appropriately described today, the library never closed. The city has provided much needed support to the library, funding staff positions and capital projects. The ADA compliant elevator will be installed this year. The Library Foundation is actively fundraising and turning our dreams of the Library Plaza into a reality. These projects and the success of the library could not have happened without your help. Thank you. As you very well know, and as you stated today, Madam Mayor, revenue numbers are down. The library, among many other groups, has been forced to make tough choices. Director Caliente and her team have made the strategic decision to reduce open hours of the library in order to continue supporting a very large variety of programs essential to our community. The library team is strapped. There's been no increase to the library's operational budget in 6 years. But of course, each year everything costs more. Director Caliente and her team continue to do more and more with fewer resources. This extraordinary team needs your help, particularly in funding social service assistance in the library. Provide the necessary funding to facilitate services out of the library so that those who need social service assistance, like our community members experiencing homelessness, can receive the help they need from trained professionals. As the library is poised to reopen its doors, I urge the council to support the library as recommended today. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker.
Madam Mayor, our final speaker is Margaret Croco. And Margaret Croco, you have been unmuted, and you may unmute yourself and begin your comment, please.
Thank you, Mayor Murillo and City Council members. I am going to echo much of what you have heard previously from my fellow board members of the library board. I do want to emphasize with you, while we are all very aware of the acute needs of those experiencing homelessness and want to do everything we can to support an effort to address this in our wonderful community, some of the programs that are being offered by the library are also of note. I would mention the efforts and the programming for youth and the proposal to create an expanded youth center in the library, the efforts to do early childhood education, and even to help enhance individuals in our community who might be interested in this as a business opportunity. We know that the need for childhood is great, and that during the pandemic, it is very often across this nation been young mothers of young children who have had to step out of the labor force because of what's happened with schooling. And also the digital divide, which is again a national crisis, but one that's experienced in our home community. So in so many ways, the library has made efforts to address these issues that are of compelling need in the broader community. But as I think others have pointed to, this has come at the expense of stretching the staff and not adding to the collections in ways that might curtail some of the long waiting times for both digital audio books and hardbound books. So thank you for your support to date. And like Mackenzie Wildman before me and Milt Hess, our library board chair, I would encourage you to see what you could do, even in these tough times, to help reverse the decline of the operating budget over the last 6 years, and to see what you could do to redress these problems for such a vital organization within our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else, Mr. Stowe, before I close public comment officially? There'll always be time for folks to weigh in on the budget in general. This is our first hearing. Mr. Stowe, sorry.
Oh, Madam Mayor, no one else indicated they'd like to speak on this item.
So we'll close public comment and we'll go to our deliberations now. I do want to take a little break before we go to the next item. So Mr. Friedman, go ahead, start us off, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And first, thank you to Ms. Caliente, Ms. Huerta, and Ms. Hernandez for outstanding presentation. We've heard so much today, and it's so exciting about what our library offers. And for me, when I consider the library, there just isn't, when we're trying to build community, there isn't a better investment that we can make than in our libraries, because it touches so many people in so many ways, as we saw today. And it's just an outstanding institution, and we're very fortunate to have two libraries here, one downtown and then over on the east side as well, that really serves that community. And we're looking to expand some mobile services into other areas, which is terrific. I do want to thank our members of the public, our library board, Library Foundation, for the great partnerships that you've had and for stepping up. And Mr. Stern, thank you for the quotes. As someone who likes to put quotes up here, I think you outdid me today. Those are some really great quotes. I'm going to go back and watch the tape and use them for future hearings when the library comes up. But first, I just wanted to say that with all the programming, I mean, it's just outstanding. We have the Stay and Play, which is a great collaboration with our parks And that's another great investment we can make is within our parks and our libraries, and to see them collaborating and forming that partnership to serve our community is just, it's really what Santa Barbara is about and going forward. And I really want to emphasize that we need to invest in our library, and it is a challenging, very, very challenging year. And it is unfortunate that we are looking at having reduced hours and reduced services. And but that's the reality that we're facing, and hopefully we'll be able to right that a year from now if revenues start coming back and that. So we hear you, I hear you about investing in our library, investing in our staff, investing in our content. And for me, when 15 years ago, when I first considered volunteering for the city and serving on a board, I chose the library board for this very reason, to see the capacity. And I served on there for 10 years and then on the Library Foundation soon after that. And I've seen these projects come through, and Jim Jackson raised an excellent point during your public comment, is the Children's Library transformed what was possible within our library. Not only the partnership with the foundation, but just transformed what was possible for our community. And the Library Plaza project now, that I thank my colleagues for investing in that, it's going to be able to move those services up into the center of town, and I think it's going to exceed what we've been able to do as we transform our downtown. The Children's Library has exceeded capacity almost from day one, and so we're going to be able to bring those services up. So the next step, though, is we also need to invest in our teens. We have a lot of challenges, and there's been youth violence, and we really need to show to our community and to our teens that we want to do what's best for them. And the fact that the foundation was able to get us a head start with that $100,000, and I thank that anonymous donor, whoever you are, what I'd like to propose first as part of the budget is that we do invest the rest of the money that's needed out of Measure C, or if there's another source, Mr. Casey, you can bring it back, but Measure C would be the most likely, is to invest that this year to match that grant or get us all the way there so we can do the full design this year. Because having that full design gives us much more opportunity in the years to come to get that teen center, that teen space that, as we saw, is going to be designed by the teens. It's going to have input by the teens on it, because then we'll have that space for them, and it'll create a great circle. In just probably under a decade, you'll have that children's library that came in. You have infants and young families down there. They'll come up as they're a little older into the plaza, and then their formative years will be up in the library on the second floor in a space that they design. And you can have a whole entire generation of kids growing up in our town using our library. It's really magical to me. And quite frankly, running for council, there's a lot of things that I wanted to do, but for me, investing in our library and being a voice on the council as a council member to advocate for the library and what it can do is what really, one of the reasons that I really wanted to be on council when I ran. So sorry, I just love the library so much, you can all tell. So I would like to ask my colleagues to support moving forward with the capital plan to get that full design, that cost. And I think Ms. Cadiente said it was somewhere in the $100,000 range. And with that grant, we could get there in a year. I do also want to address the issues with our homeless brothers and sisters, and we really need to care for them, and we know they're going to be coming back to the library. And I'd rather have them in the library than on the streets where they are now, because we have an opportunity here to invest in a social worker that can be there on a regular basis, and also in that adjacent area in the front of the Museum of Art and other areas, to really emphasize and really help them get document ready, get them what they need in terms of for housing vouchers and anything else that they need. Because if we don't invest in the social worker this year, we know it's going to impact our librarians at a time when their jobs are going to be stretched to the limit. 30% was before COVID. I think it will probably exacerbate beyond that 30% of their time. We heard because of the challenges that we have. And so to have those additional resources, today I think we just need to go forward and say we support that, because I think there are different options and different models that Mr. Casey and staff could come back with within the month, and we come back a month from now when we get the preliminary budget. So it could be CityNet, it could be the county. I don't think we necessarily need to make the decision on the specific type of model today, but just say that we are supportive of it. And if we actually go back to the budget a year ago, we actually said we wanted to look at investing in 4 new positions in the city that make our city more equitable, more just. And social worker was one of the 4 positions that we were looking at, but it's been very difficult in terms of funding. But I think we don't have a choice right now. I think the timing is here to do it. And so we really need to invest in that social worker to help not only the homeless, but help our librarians and help all the patrons out there, because I think it will really move things forward. So with that, again, I just want to thank all of our staff. I don't need to go over the programming. It's just amazing what you do on a daily basis. Even though the libraries were closed, you were open that entire time, serving our community well. And so really just want to advocate for the funding for the teen center design this year, and for the social services worker for the library and downtown there. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Freeman. I would direct your attention to the budget message. A17, A18 and 19 has a list of the Measure C capital projects and some of them are library related. I guess we could direct Mr. Casey and Mr. DeMartini to, and the library director to look over some of these projects, if some of that money could be redirected, or I support looking at both of your suggestions. We should ask for some examination and coming back. So I just wanted you to know. Yeah, thanks. It's in the budget message. Thanks. Ms. Sneddon, are you ready? There you go.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be brief and mainly to the budget questions there too, but just for performance evaluation too, that the fact that the library never closed, even when the physical space is closed, and I'm thinking back to the Thomas fire, to debris flow, when we've had bad air quality or high heat days, that the library is a physical space where people get information, where they gather, where they're safe. And then the ability of the staff to adapt that to a non-physical space and to still be sort of home and that resource is really incredible. And then I think as it is with education too, that making that complete adjustment, and then as we come back into in-person, the adjustments that they're making in the ways to have still an outreach space. And I think it's actually brilliant that on the days that they're closed, that they'll still have staff members sort of out in the field and bringing library programs to people where they are. And I just, I really applaud the adaptability. We've talked a lot about that, being nimble and adaptable and responsive. And this is this exact example of that. I think too, we talked about last year about, more attention to equity and more attention to looking at diversity and inclusion. And those aren't just sort of words you put into a document. This really shows, and they demonstrated such clear examples of how, and you don't get to those examples of how unless you're really internalizing that that's important. And it's frankly what the library staff has always been doing. And then to have that be a sort of named value and to be directing that in places has really brought it even further in ways that I really appreciate. And especially the Spanish outreach and the needs assessment and sort of expanding that collection. I will say I do love the library on the go, and then that description of before the library on the go of training the older generation on how to use technology to be able to communicate with families. It can't be overstated what a service that is for grandparents, and especially in this year when so many people could not physically see each other. And I think it was particularly hard on older people. And it's another example of a library sort of across all demographics, across all ages, really meeting the needs of people and adapting, which I'm sure we all know. So I think for the funding part, whatever it takes, I think we have to have an embedded social worker. And I think it's worth trying to work that into the agreement with the county as we're talking with them about these different inequities in funding and the impacts to the central library and to the programming, and that we're still providing programming but not receiving as much funding. That may be something that we could negotiate in a way that's mutually beneficial, that helps the whole area. So maybe that's a way to do it, but if it isn't a way to do that, I feel so strongly that we have to get that going. I personally don't see CityNet as fulfilling that same function. We fund CityNet to do a whole bunch of things regionally, and I'd like to see the county provide us a social worker. I think it's for the regional collaboration would be really a good outcome on that. Library Plaza, I cannot wait, and I'm very excited that elevator is finally going to be done. The teen center, I guess I'll say that I think it could wait a year. I mean, I think with Library Plaza and what we're trying to do with social work, what we're trying to do with expanding the collections in ways that meet people where they are, and with the sort of mobile library on the go. I think that the teen center, I mean, there is space up there. It is set aside. It has nice tables, chairs. It's not unwelcoming. It's not in disrepair. I think it could wait. I think it would be, really excellent when it comes. But if it comes as a choice between those two, I would maybe stretch that one out a little bit. But I just thank you to the team of the library to keep things going on the shoestring and when you're stretched so thin, and really just thank you.
Thank you. Comments, Mr. Jordan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just echo all the points made by both Councilmember Sneddon and Friedman. In particular, I agree wholeheartedly with finding a way, any way, but finding a way to embed a social services worker there. A couple talking points that resonated with me, that made it clear to me that pre-COVID and certainly post-COVID, the library probably has the greatest number of those who are unhoused at any one time in one place. And so it fits the model of bringing the services and the resources to the unhoused, and effectively meets it in a manner that is more cost effective than chasing them around in multiple places in smaller numbers. It's also just extremely frustrating to hear that at a time where we're cutting resources to you and me, our children, or our parents, that the resources that we are committing are offset by the amount of time that those resources have to spend, up to 30% of their time, taking care of the homeless in the library. So I can't emphasize enough. I don't know. I don't know which model will work and who does it, but I do echo Councilmember Sneddon that we need to find a way to make that work. The other part of the presentation that really resonated with me was the library's need to get out in front of upgrading their wireless and internet infrastructure. We essentially are in a city where we have a sole source provider for internet services, and we are frequently seeing wireless providers monetize our right-of-ways more and more. It boggles my mind that we cannot find a partner in those areas to involve the library and help with that infrastructure increase. So much of our city depends upon that. The library depends upon that. There's a future there also for De La Guerra Plaza to actually become a plaza, like a plaza around the world, where people gravitate to and connect and engage and are able to reach wireless connectivity at the same time too. So I'm interested in working more on that. We'll pursue that, but generally echo my thanks to staff. It's been a really challenging year for this for a lot of departments, but for this particular department too. And I think they've risen as all of staff has. But we're gonna say this over and over again over the next 3 weeks. I think that all of staff has truly had a miserable year, but has risen above that misery to really be champions in the year of the pandemic. So thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Ms. Harmon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be very brief. I'm just going to third or fourth all of the sincere thanks of my colleagues, truly. You know, I think Councilmember Jordan was just saying this year in particular, I completely agree. I have to say, I didn't think it was possible for those of us with young families to rely more on the library than we already did. But this year in the pandemic, the way that you have transitioned and still provided us with resources that we needed this year when we had to keep our toddlers and young kids home, we needed them more than ever. And you were there. I mean, you really were there for us from the very beginning. And I've heard that from so many moms in particular, who maybe didn't use the library a ton before the pandemic and are now just so in love with what you provide, as I am. So I really had to put that out there, and sincerely my thanks on a personal level for that as well. And just getting to the issues, the main issues that we've been discussing, Madam Mayor. First, on the social worker, I completely agree with my colleagues. That's a priority for me. And again, I agree. I'm not sure what form it will take, but it's certainly a priority that gets done this year. So I'd really like to see that. On the teen center question, I agree. It could potentially be pushed a year. That said, I would like to see what options are there. It's something that is a priority for me, and I of course the devil is in the details. I would like to see what that would mean to be able to fully fund that this year, but I'm very supportive of it, and it's something I would like to see happen sooner than later. So if it's possible for us to get a sense of what that might look like, I would really appreciate that. But certainly the social worker is something that's a must do. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I have some comments. Okay. Anyone else want to make comments at this point before I go? Okay. Thank you so much for the presentation. And I do support the shift to focused programming and a change in the hours. I support the changes to the fees. Thank you so much for looking at the library roof terrace renovation and the teen space. Both of those have been a long time coming. I mean, the notes that I took is that, yes, we should ask Mr. Casey and library staff to come back with options for funding the teen space sooner than later. How would we work that in our capital dollars? And then also to ask for options related to a social services worker, maybe a social worker itself working out of the library. So please bring us back those options. But you know, that said, I would caution my colleagues that I knew we would get these items and we're trying to tighten our belts. And so, you know, just be measured in these early times looking at the budget, because we'll get Parks and Rec coming up, public safety, community development department, harbor, they all might need something. So, but for the time being, let's ask for staff to come back with options on those two items. Social services worker, social worker, and then how do we fund the teen space? And then I'll just close my comment saying thank you for Library to Go. As a resident of the West Side, I know that we need books and library services over on the West Side. So thank you so much. And if there's no other comments, I'll also thank all the public comment speakers. And we do need a break. It's been 2.5 hours, and then we'll come back and do airport. we'll take a 5-minute break and we'll be disciplined about it. 5 minutes in recess. Thank you. will go to our airport department budget presentation. Mr. Thompson, welcome to the meeting. And Ms. Zackerson, good to see you. Go ahead, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. Today we will share with you the fiscal year 22 Airport Enterprise Fund operating and capital budgets. But before we get into the details of the budget, I'd like to share with you some background information on where we've been this past year, where we are now, and where we see ourselves headed. So just bear with us as we get through some of this foundational information. I think it'll be very important for the context of the budget itself. But first, I'm pleased to announce that despite the challenges resulting from a worldwide pandemic in 2020, the airport is in good shape and poised for recovery. In fact, we're not just poised for recovery, we're actually beginning to see positive improvements in our recovery already. And this is ahead of the summer schedule even. So that's great news. Airports across the nation sustained significant financial and operational impacts resulting from a historic loss of air travel, and Santa Barbara Airport was no exception. But through sound financial strategies, we were able to maneuver the uncertainty we shared with you during our budget presentation last year when we presented the FY21 budget, which we reported at the time that the uncertainty that existed would require us to manage our budget throughout this past year in real time, and we did just that. To ensure our success, though, we have been fiscally responsible and have taken needed action to ensure we made sound business decisions. Specifically, because of the hard work and dedication of our team, the airport remained open and operating throughout the pandemic. The team ensured that we met our regulatory obligations and that services were provided 24/7. We responded to a slower than expected recovery this past year by implementing a budget reduction strategy that maintained essential services while curbing expenses to match underperforming revenues related specifically to air travel. The airport was also able to repay its $3 million loan to the city for the 6100 Hollister development project ahead of schedule. Staff took necessary steps to apply for available federal airport stimulus funding that resulted in the award of approximately $9.6 million in grant dollars to support our revenue shortfalls. We met our obligations without the need to increase rates and fees other than those that were contractually required. So while we believe we have weathered the worst of this current pandemic, we're not out of the woods. This year's budget also comes before you with challenges ahead, but I also believe there are great opportunities ahead as well. Airports throughout the nation are in recovery mode, and we're making great progress over where we were this time last year. However, we remain down from our historic performance in 2019, just prior to the pandemic. Pre-COVID-19, Santa Barbara Airport, as some of you may remember, was the fastest growing airport in Southern California. And the 2 months preceding the pandemic, we were up 40% and 44% year over year, respectively. We're confident that our air service will return. The only question is how slow, fast, or sustainable the recovery will be when it does come back fully. That will be determined by two factors: the economy and passenger confidence in flying, both of which are improving as we speak. And now I'd like to hand it over to Ms. Zackerson, who will share some of the positive signs we're seeing already in our business that support our proposed budget.
All right, good afternoon, Madam Mayor, council members. As Henry alluded to, we feel like we have passed the worst of the pandemic, weathered that storm. And for us, demand for commercial air service is really the key to our ability to thrive. And we're cautiously optimistic that the current increase that we're seeing in demand will prove to be sustainable. And we're cautiously optimistic that the strides we've made at beating back this pandemic also will be sustainable. We're already starting to experience some of the vitality in the terminal that's reminiscent of 2019 when we were at our peak levels. And coming off that peak, you may remember in calendar year 2019, we had almost 1 million passengers. But of course, early in 2020, we lost air service to several of our key destinations. But nearly a year later, almost exactly, we achieved our long-held goal of adding service by Southwest Airlines and the restoration of most of those destinations. And on top of that, our longtime core group of airlines, American, Alaska, and United, have started adding new destinations. American started flying their weekend service to Chicago just this past weekend. United will be adding daily service to Chicago in June. And Alaska also will be adding direct daily service to San Diego next month. And these carriers are all beginning to add capacity, frequency to these destinations. And we hope before too long, we'll start seeing an increase in aircraft size. All of these developments coming off of a pandemic, ironically, may put us in a better position in the long term to anchor our role as a key regional center for air transportation. So we're looking forward to the road ahead in the next year and seeing where recovery can take us. And I'm happy to take any questions that you might have at this point about where we are.
Thank you. I think we had been taking questions at the end of the presentation. Everybody's keeping notes. So we'll continue to be in listening mode for now. I don't see anyone popping on, but thank you for the presentation so far.
Great, thank you. So while we're on a good path for the airport, we're not without challenges. Next, I'd like to highlight some specific priority issues we're tracking in the coming year. The first that most of you would be familiar with is the FBO redevelopment project. This has been an ongoing effort for several years. The current significant issue that we are addressing is the advanced relocation phase to create space for ultimately the new FBO sites. This work requires facility and lease modifications, which are underway, and we are communicating what that process looks like to the affected tenants. So we hope to be able to position this project for an RFP release within the next year. But we will keep council aware as this effort is moving forward. It's a very complex project that has a lot of moving parts, and it's kind of like a domino effect. You have to trigger one aspect of the project before you can get to the next one. So very complex in that respect. The other priority issue that we're working on has to do with flight instruction regulation. This issue actually is fairly complex, and it's actually 3 separate issues that are all related to flight instruction that has been going on for more than 4 years. Our compliance with FAA regulations is driving these changes, and we're on path to bring proposed rule changes to the council later this year. I believe that we're making progress. We have decided to layer in a task force group component to this to try to get all of the affected parties together to discuss competing interests and hopefully come out with some agreement and then bring that forward to council. The next issue I'd like to just touch upon is one called PFAS hazmat assessment. And I'll just say on the front end that PFAS is an acronym for a hazardous substance that has a very complicated scientific name that it's next to possible to explain. So PFAS for short. And this particular substance is found in firefighting foam that's used at Santa Barbara Airport and every other commercial airport in the nation. This firefighting foam is required to be used by the FAA to fight aircraft fires, so we're required to use it. And its presence on the airport is regulated by the regional water board, who did issue an order to airports over a year ago. And so we're kind of in an investigative phase of the project. And what that's requiring us to do is to work with consultants and outside legal support to determine the impact of this substance, as well as the direction. There will be some federal direction, some federal oversight because of the mandatory use of this chemical. But there's a lot of uncertainty there, and just want to share that term with you because you will be hearing more in the coming months. We are still gathering information. The other project I wanted to share was the General Western Hangar project. Some of you may be familiar with the two pre-World War II hangars that we have located on the airport that have been sitting idle and deteriorating for many years, but there's some renewed interest from outside parties to salvage and redevelop these properties. It is a highly complex issue related to the suitability of the site that they currently sit on due to flooding. And in addition to relocation issues, they're likely going to require a complete rebuild, so it's not a refurbishment. And so that's an issue. All of that's going to drive significant costs. So we're working with outside interests to see if there's an option to partner to make this happen. And we will be sharing more information on that issue as we work through it. And then I also wanted to share with you our development direction with the terminal expansion and garage design and planning. So our existing master plan called for an expansion of the terminal and parking facilities. And so we're working with the rental car agencies as we begin to recover to re-implement a customer facility charge fee to support the cost of planning and design. And that's the initial discussion here, is planning and design. Construction would likely follow years down the road, or a couple of years down the road. But we're at this point behind in our planning and design for both terminal expansion options as well as additional parking facilities. And with recovery coming back, as swiftly as it is at this point, we really need to get these efforts moving along before we begin to have capacity issues and be constrained further than was forecasted. The existing master plan did not factor in Southwest as a possibility. That's a reality for us now. And so we are going to have to go back and update the master plan and update our forecasts to make sure that whichever direction we're headed in, it's the appropriate direction for short-term, mid-term, and long-term improvements. So I share all of these issues because they're very complex issues. They're all priority issues. And all of these issues are in addition to managing the day-to-day operation of the airport and maintaining the airport. And our greatest challenge will be finding the resources and capacity to address these issues. Again, all very high priority, all very important issues for the airport. Next, I'd like, before we get into the budget again, I'd like to share some details specifically on how we built the budget, which helps highlight the numbers that you're going to see shortly here. First, the airport enterprise proposed budget was developed with sound projections in which we optimistically developed our revenues and took a very conservative approach in budgeting our expenses. While the impacts of COVID-19 to air travel is reducing, there still remains some uncertainty as to recovery, as I mentioned earlier. We're definitely in recovery mode. The question is how fast we'll see recovery, how soon do we get to and exceed the 2019 high year for us. But recovery is definitely built into the budget we're about to share with you. While the impacts of COVID-19 have been reducing, we are seeing our revenues improve at the same time as well. So that is a good sign in the direction that we're headed. With the council approval, the airport has already accepted the award of $13.2 million in COVID-19 airport relief grant funds in FY20 and FY21. In our FY22 budget, we anticipate an additional $6.3 million to support our continued recovery. Our current approach does not anticipate the need to use available airport reserves. However, that does assume continued positive recovery and growth in the coming months. The airport's approach is to continue to monitor these triggers we mentioned earlier, and we will make needed adjustments throughout this next year as well to ensure we're fiscally responsible. And then finally, the airport is required to meet with the airlines that serve Santa Barbara Airport, who contribute to a majority of our budget. And they are in agreement with the rates and charges that drive the budget we're presenting to you today. All U.S. airlines continue to be financially challenged, and therefore they understand our challenges in preparing this budget, and we will continue to have discussions with them throughout this year as they deal with their own financial impact and recovery as well. And now I will hand it over to Jonathan, our Business Services Manager, who will share the details of our airport enterprise budget. Jonathan.
Thank you. Oh,
you're on.
You're muted, sir. Mr. Stow, do you need to push a button in the background there for Mr. Abad? We can't hear you. Ms. Nickerson, somebody working the tech side?
Oh, yes, sorry, Madam Mayor, just a moment.
We're dying to hear your report. And what a difference, the library versus the airport, right? I'll have Mr. Casey come on and explain why can't the robust airport budget give money to the library? No, it doesn't work that way. But Mr.
Well, Madam,
Casey?
while we're stalling for time, I'll go ahead and answer your question. I know it was somewhat rhetorical, but answer your questions down there. So the airport is an enterprise fund. And as you know, we work in a fund approach to government budgeting. And you have some funds that are called enterprise funds in which they are responsible for living within their means. They don't get any general fund dollars. So they don't get property tax, sales tax, or bed tax support. They live off the revenue that they generate to support their operations. The water fund is an example, the wastewater fund, and the airport department. And I will just say, I wouldn't categorize the airport budget as robust or well-funded. I think we'll cover that shortly. They were very fortunate to have significant federal assistance to get through COVID. Which has left them in a position to climb out of this pandemic budget okay. But you're correct. We cannot use airport funds to help subsidize the library because they are an enterprise fund.
Thanks for that. Mr. Abad, are you there? You know, maybe if you turn, obviously your camera's off, but if we can still hear you, we can take your report that way, if that helps.
Let's see here.
Honorable Mayor.
Go ahead, Mr. Kalan.
Well, while they're finishing, I wanted to emphasize one comment that Director Thompson made. And I wanted to emphasize it so it's not lost in the array of great news he presented. We are administratively constrained in a number of areas, meaning the amount of work is going to exceed the administrative choke points in the organization. Director Thompson mentioned the PFAS discovery at the airport. That requires a significant amount of legal effort, as do many of their other projects. So as you are considering the various elements of the budget for the different departments, I have to say that from our standpoint, the cutbacks we've all needed to make have impacted our administrative capacity. Thanks.
Understood. Thank you for that. Mr. Thompson, should we take a break so that the technicalities could be ironed out?
Yes, Madam Mayor, if you could just give us 5 minutes, we'll work it out.
We'll be in recess. Thank you.
Thank you.
Santa Barbara City Council, and we're looking at our airport budget. Please go ahead.
Okay, just one moment. Don't see him yet.
It's okay.
We've got a backup plan, so we'll be right there.
It looks like his audio is on.
All right. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and City Council members. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Apologize for the technical delay. My name is Jonathan Abad, and I'm the new Business Services Manager for the Airport Department since December. And I came from the Finance Department as the city's budget analyst, helped put together this budget document during the past 12 years. Sorry, I'm out of breath. I ran over from my office. Today, I'm here to present the Airport Department's recommended operating and capital budget for fiscal 22. Next slide, please. Here's the outline of our presentation today. We'll do a quick overview of the department and its programs, discuss how our budget framework is impacted by the pandemic, and the supplemental grant funding that we receive. We'll go over rates and fees, capital project, and then reserve projections. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. As an enterprise fund, it means that we're financially self-supporting and we don't use any local taxes for the airport operations. It's actually a federal law for airports to generate its own revenues to be self-sustaining, and that no airport revenues may be used for purposes other than airport operations. The airport also must support its own capital needs to maintain, develop, and improve airport facilities. The airport is heavily regulated by the FAA to ensure safety and security. The FAA also provides capital grants as part of the Federal Airport Improvement Program, AIP for short. It provides 90% funding for eligible capital improvement projects. Next slide, please. The department consists of 12 programs under 4 divisions. The Business and Property Division includes marketing and communications and airport parking. The airport operations includes airport law enforcement, formerly known as the airport security, and the airport and the certifications and operations program. The facilities planning and development currently handles the FAA funded capital projects. The facilities maintenance includes grounds and landscape maintenance, custodial maintenance, and air and operational area maintenance. And next slide, please. Altogether, we propose a total of 68.5 authorized full-time equivalents, that's FTE for short, for fiscal 22. This does not include about 9 FTE city fire employees that runs our aircraft rescue and firefighting unit, that's ARF for short, and 2 FTE from public works that provide engineering and project support. Most of our authorized positions, as shown in this chart, are in the maintenance, law enforcement, and certifications and operations programs. Next slide, please. For fiscal 22, we're proposing to add a net of 1.5 FTE to our authorized positions. We're proposing to add a new airport planning and environmental affairs manager. This position will provide oversight of airport environmental compliance, engineering, and development efforts. This added position, we're also proposing to replace the vacant half-time community education liaison with a full-time marketing supervisor. This position is needed to support marketing, air service development, education programs, public education, public relations, and community outreach. Next slide, please. The airport department is appropriated in 3 separate fund groups, as shown in the summary of sources and uses in the budget document. The airport fund includes the airport operating and capital, the development, and the hangar fund. The capital grants fund includes the FAA grants fund, which provides the funding for 90% of eligible airport infrastructure projects such as runways, taxiways, and airport lighting. It also includes the passenger facility charge, which PFC for short, which receives revenues from eligible commercial passengers and helps pay for the terminal debt service. The third is the customer facility charge fund that receives revenues from rental car companies used for rental car facilities. And next slide, please. Here's the appropriations breakdown by major expenses groups, with salaries and benefits clearly making up the largest share at 33% for the 68.5 authorized FTEs, hourly employees, and overtime costs. Supplies and services makes up the next largest share, 28%. This category includes airport costs of the 9 fire FTEs provided by the fire department and the 2 engineering FTEs from Public Works. And allocated cost, 9%. And next slide, please. Here's the appropriations breakdown, excluding transfers and capitals, by program. The largest shares in certifications and operations, including the ARF costs. The facilities maintenance shares, 21%. This includes most of the airport's utility expenses. Then administration at 19%. It includes parking services that's contracted out and overhead allocated expenses for general fund services such as finance, HR, and city attorney. Next slide, please. And here's the operating revenue breakdown by sources. The terminal and commercial aviation revenues makes up our commercial air services, which is currently about half of the airport's operating revenues in fiscal 22. Just a note that prior to the pandemic, this portion used to be closer to about 60%. 26% from terminal revenues, that includes indirect sources from airport parking, terminal concessions, rental cars, and ground transportation services. 24% from commercial aviations. Most of this comes from airline terminal rent and landing fees, and the rest from landing bridge, fuel, and remain overnight fees. Commercial and industrial lease revenues comes from the airport properties in the area surrounding the airfield and represents 26% of revenues. Non-commercial aviation represents 22% of airport revenues coming from corporate, private, and recreational aviation activities, and 1% from miscellaneous revenues from TSA reimbursements and badging. Next slide, please. And then next slide, please. The following employment assumptions were used to prepare a fiscal 22 budget. Fiscal 21 levels were initially projected to fall down to about a third of the fiscal 20 passenger traffic as we were preparing the budget. But more recent data available is showing a little better at about 40% of the FY20 employment. While still at less than half the pre-pandemic levels, March 2021 employments did come in as the highest monthly so far since the pandemic started a year ago. And then Southwest Airlines started the following month in April with 5 flights per day, 3 of them to Las Vegas every day. This anticipated growth we're seeing puts us right on track of our fiscal 22 projected growth model. Next slide, please. Including the $6.3 million in federal relief grant, we're budgeting a total of about $27.3 million operating revenues from fiscal 22. That's $28.5 million, including capital and T-hanger fund revenues. And next slide, please. Changes from the adopted budget includes $500,000 in revenues from the 6100 Hollister, now budgeted as part of the operating fund. Up until fiscal 21, we were collecting this in the development fund, and when the development fund was paid off, development loan was paid off, this was budgeted in the part of the operating budget, airport operating fund. We will, however, continue to transfer about half of this revenue back to the development fund for future maintenance and expansion. Variance, next slide, please. And this variance in non-commercial aviation is driven by corporate activities within the FBO that remained strong during the pandemic. Next slide, please. And okay, we received $5 million in COVID-19 federal grant relief in the first half of fiscal 21, and another $3.5 million anticipated in the second half, for a total of $8.5 million in fiscal 21. Then another $6.3 million is budgeted in fiscal 22 from the stimulus passed under the Biden administration. Next slide, please. Passenger facility charge is based on employments. Fiscal 22 budget appears lower than the adopted 21, only because last year when we prepared the adopted fiscal 21 budget, we anticipated the pandemic might end by fall of 2020, but clearly that wasn't the case, and it continued worsening through the winter, and it finally turned around, and we're seeing the recovery now in spring. We're projecting this recovery to continue into fiscal 22 as reflected in this revenue budget. Next slide, please. FAA, AIP capital grants are not generally budgeted in the annual budget, and it will be appropriated during mid-year as they are received. And next slide, please. This is the CFC revenue, and I'll go over more of that in the capital discussion. Next slide, please. We're proposing no increases to the parking and ground transportation fees in the master fee resolution for fiscal 22. Next slide, please. And the expenditure budget for fiscal 22 are held at status quo from the adopted 21. This means level of service are held unchanged. We've reallocated some budget to address deferred maintenance costs for the 495 Fairview hangar to fix leaks on the roof to avoid further damage on the upper levels. Additional funding was also added for the required PFAS management and remediation, and some additional hourly salaries and benefits to support the department with major projects and initiatives, and a new CFC revenue to fund half of the Southfield development capital projects and planning and design for the future garage facilities. Next slide, please. Here's the proposed operating fund expenditure budget for fiscal 22, totaling $26.4 million. Next slide, please. Here's where we've shifted budget from supplies and services to special projects for the 495 Fairview hangar and PFAS. Next slide, please. The PFC expenses includes a portion of terminal debt service and appropriated reserves to balance that fund. And facility charge fund expense includes the transfer to the airport capital to fund half of the South Field project. Next slide, please. Here's the list of the capital budget totaling 4.1 million in fiscal 22 and 1.2 million fiscal 23. We anticipate some grants, some federal grants from the FAA AIP program, Airport Improvement Program, to help fund a couple of these projects. We anticipate $608,000 from the grant in fiscal 22 towards the reimbursement for the master plan update and additional funding for the airfield marking, signage, and lighting update plan. These anticipated AIP fund will be appropriated when they're received during the mid-year process next year. Next slide, please. We've met with the rental car companies and introduced our plan to restart the customer facility charge of $10 per rental car contract. $1 million of the CFC will fund half of the South Field development project to demolish Hangar 5 and the existing 150 space rental car ready return lot to build 228 new rental car parking spaces south of Gate 1 at the terminal. This will also provide 3 remain overnight aircraft parking positions. Next slide, please. Our long-term objectives is to build a healthy operating reserves above policy to fund a very long list of deferred capital needs. Santa Barbara's passenger terminal opened almost 10 years ago this August. And while the facility is still fairly modern, it's beginning to require repairs, upgrades, and replacement of equipment. In addition, many of the airport's revenue-generating commercial industrial properties are World War II era properties that are in need of ongoing significant repairs and improvements. We're optimistic about the recovery we're seeing, but we are aware of the uncertainties that still remain. So we prepared our planned expenses at status quo level in both fiscal 22 and 23, and we hope for the increases in revenues to continue growing and building a healthy operating reserve for the future of the airport. Next slide, please. Here's the other funds reserve balances in the airport as of ending fiscal 20 last year, with a capital fund at $291,000, which is not expected to change, as well as not expected to change, as all the capital funding for fiscal 22 and 23 have been identified. A development fund finished up the 6100 Hollister development with $445,000 in reserve for the future development and maintenance. This will grow annually by about $250,000 that we plan to transfer from half of the 6100 Hollister revenue. The FAA grants showing negative only because the reimbursements due from the FAA are pending for some projects. The PFC had over $2 million in available, of which about $240,000 will be needed for the revenue shortfall in the PFC fund in FY21, and T-Hangar at $17,000 in reserve balance. And next slide, please. The Airport Commission received this presentation just a couple of weeks ago and recommended the approval of the airport's budget, and now we come to you to do the same. Next slide, please. Hey, this concludes my portion of the presentation of the proposed budget. Thank you very much for your time and listening to us, and we're here for your questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Abad. Yeah. So let's take questions. I looked at your reports. Everything seems very straightforward. Mr. Jordan, you have questions, and then we'll look for public comment. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of quick ones. Hey, Mr. Thompson, how you doing?
Good, thanks.
You've finally taken off your swag from Southwest, I see, huh?
Absolutely. Exciting times.
So the question that's really confusing for me is back on slide 28, I think the reserves and the level of accumulating reserves over that period of time that you're projecting? And I get it that as you go out past next year, as you go out past this year, you're not assured of anything. I would imagine when you need to use your reserves, you really need to use them. And is that kind of why we see the reserves being so much higher than the line where it says council policy reserves? Or what is the plan to return those to the airport community at some point?
So it is the projection, and it probably doesn't fully project the uses that we're going to have, for that. The airport has, we're a very capital intensive department within the city. So we actually do have a lot of unfunded capital needs that are not even represented in our current 5-year capital plan. So there's lots of uses for additional capital funds that aren't quite detailed yet. So I wouldn't look at those as anything but projections.
Good. Okay. And, frankly, you only have to drive by and see some of the old buildings, right? Yeah, I agree.
Exactly.
And then I'm wondering, there's no mention in here. I don't even know if it's appropriate to mention it, but if there's a status or a future on the property formerly known as the Elephant Bar coming to us someday.
Yeah, currently litigation is ongoing, and we've got to get past that, and we need to figure out what the future will be for that property. So we're not really getting into the details of it until we get past litigation.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Any other questions from the council? Ms. Sneddon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just very quick question. The parking expansion, is that expected to be a structure or will it be flat?
Madam Mayor and Council Member Sneddon, the design hasn't quite yet been determined. That's kind of the phase we're in now, is identifying what the size and look and design will be. The master plan did anticipate a structure, though. It's just a vision in the master plan. So it's not clear exactly where it will be located or the size of it or anything. That's the effort that we're kind of behind in flushing out.
I guess moving into that, we wouldn't want to block sort of the architecture of the building and how beautiful, and the mountains, and it'll be tricky to find a spot for it. But
yeah, whatever the structure, it's going to need to complement the existing terminal facility, and that'll be a priority in the design and planning effort.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Any other questions? I had one about the FBO, and for the public, it's fixed base operator, right?
That's correct.
And it means the use of the airport that's private people, not the commercial airlines, right? So did pandemic stall the RFP going out, the request for proposals?
Madam Mayor, you're exactly right. We thought we would be much further along, but the pandemic slowed some of the advanced phases that needed to be done. We were still working on it throughout the pandemic, but we weren't quite able to execute some of the lead requirements on the phasing.
Okay. And then I did take a note when you said expanding the car, so the car rental needs more space too? Oh, okay.
Absolutely. So the garage concept that we're envisioning will be a combination of rental car parking and support facility, as well as public parking. So it'll serve a dual purpose there. So that's what's driving the need for it.
Okay. Well, those were my questions. Your report was very thorough. Mr. Gutierrez, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good to see you all. I have a couple questions in regards to you mentioned earlier about that hangar, the 100-year-old hangar, I believe. You said that there is someone who has showed interest in it. Could you elaborate a little? Is that possible as to what exactly they would want to do with that?
Absolutely. Madam Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem Gutierrez, these hangars are really dilapidated and they've been sitting in disrepair, as I mentioned, for many, many years. And about a year and a half ago, we were approached by an aviation-themed organization interested in providing some private support in rescuing the hangars. And prior to the pandemic, we began an initial discussion with them on what that partnership might look like. And unfortunately, during the pandemic, we weren't able to make a lot of progress. But their proposed use was for some type of aviation purpose. Within the past couple of weeks, we've received some additional interest from another group located in Goleta here that is interested in rescuing the hangars as well for more of a hot rod type of use to train individuals on how to maintain hot rods specifically. And so we've really tried to redirect the groups to work together to see if they can come up with a mutually agreeable solution to move forward. And we'll wait to hear back from them on what their revised vision looks like. And we'll take both uses into consideration.
Okay. You mentioning the hot rod, that's really interesting to me because I know that back in the day there used to be drag races at the airport, and James Dean raced there supposedly. Just out of curiosity, do you think that would ever happen again now with the strict FAA regulations?
Absolutely not. Not the way it did in the old days. It was quite an event, but due to safety reasons and security reasons, those types of events don't happen, particularly at commercial service airports like Santa Barbara.
Okay. So a little related to that is my question with public access to the airport. So as of right now, what's the stance the airport has on the public being able to access the airport when they're not traveling?
When you refer to public, are you referring to general aviation or passengers?
More like, so for example, could someone just go to the airport to have a meal or have a meetup with friends at the cafe or something like that?
Absolutely. Currently, we don't have any pre-security dining options, but anyone is welcomed into the terminal today. It is a public facility. The only requirement is they must wear a face covering in order to enter and be within the facility, but it's open to the public.
Okay. And you and I spoke about this a while ago, but if there's any outreach to the kids of the community on if there's any opportunity of having like field trips to the airport to teach the kids about what it's like to work at an airport or run an airport, because I know that it was a while before I was able to see an airplane in person, and I hear it from my residents that their children is still going through that. So I wonder, you had mentioned something about there being some kind of program to bring in the youth to the airport, and I wonder what's the status of that now.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of my passions, and something we're looking to try to develop in this next budget year. That's one of the things that's driving our proposed marketing position, so that we can refocus on our education programs. I hope to be able to plan something early in this next fiscal year when we have the resources and the capacity to dive into that.
Okay. And my last question is, since we were talking about expanding parking, and as you're aware, we're all aware that there's a homeless crisis, has the airport ever thought about having the parking lot be some sort of safe parking location?
We have been in discussions with Galita and other agencies about available space we have on airport property, and we have offered up what we have available. There are some federal rules against using airport property for that purpose. Using the parking facilities would probably be a challenge. That's a revenue generating location for the airport, and so we'd have to forego revenue in order to reuse it for that purpose. So we would have some challenges there, but we're absolutely aware of the need in the community, and we're actively looking for available places on the airport. But we are a fairly constrained facility, so there's not a lot of free space available on the airport.
Okay, thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem Gutierrez. Any other questions from the council? We can check and see if, with our clerk, if anyone in the meeting is raising their hand to speak for public comment.
No, Madam Mayor, at this time, no one has indicated they would like to speak on this comment, on this item.
Okay, so we'll open and close public comment. Mr. Jordan, something else from you?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I just have a couple comments to make. I was actually going to comment along the same lines as Councilmember Gutierrez. I know we're in litigation on that restaurant, but we're now in the second generation in my household that has lost connection with the airport. Our kids used to go there when we were growing up and sit there and get their first connection watching the planes behind Elephant Bar. And it's just such a shame that we're in this position. There are very few opportunities left to foster at a young age that connection to a community airport, not just a commercial airport. For the second time in 2 weeks, yesterday, they had a fire truck stop in front of our house because a grandkid was waving at them, and they of course hop out and give them stickers. And I'm just going, those fire people have this down, don't they, on how to manipulate the youth of our lives into wanting to be a fireman. And I'd love that that connection to an airport would have the same kind of emotional engagement and connection at some point in the future. Again, some of that you can't deal with. Somebody did that for you at some point 20, 30 years ago with the Elephant Bar. Some of it we've lost ourselves by the new modern airport and the squishing and whatever, with not having a restaurant that you can get to without flying on a plane, not having an observation deck. All of those are kind of wishy things that I'd love to see in the future. But I thank you for recognizing that and acknowledging that we're going to begin to chip away on that. And then I'd also like to thank you on recognizing too, I think, the importance of community-based connection and flight instruction. I have heard nothing but good things lately about the beginning of that task force and the bringing together of all the parties to try and work out that issue and not leave any group on whatever opinion they have out in the cold. And I thank you on that too. That's again, another thing for me on what really makes a community airport a successful commercial airport. So thank you for both of those. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thanks. Mr. Friedman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to really briefly, as the liaison to the Airport Commission, I just want to thank Mr. Thompson, Ms. Zackerson, Mr. Bod, and all of our airport staff just on the tremendous work you're doing for the airport. It's been a very challenging year, and to come through it and have a plan going forward, and during this time to get Southwest to come here will be a game changer for us. So just wanted to recognize that. And then to Councilmember Jordan's last point about the local flying clubs and the process. I know at the last Airport Commission meeting, you really discussed that and have that process laid out with the different groups coming in and working with them above and beyond just the standard approach for community input, because I think that'll go a long way towards having every group felt heard and bringing it forward. So I think the communication is definitely improved, and just wanted to thank you for that, because that does get to it's one of the few ways I think we have left to really engage the community in our local airport is through the general aviation. So just wanted to thank you and staff, and appreciate all you're doing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Friedman. Well, it seems that your report, written and verbal, has satisfied us. Your proposed budget, thank you so much for helping us meet our goals of a balanced overall budget. And your proposals look fine. I'm not hearing any objections. No members of the public came on either way. I know the airport serves the community well. So thank you so much. I will leave it at that. And of course, we're in the middle of a process, so something might come up later, and you'll hear about it for sure. So
great.
Mr. Thompson and staff, thank you so much for all you do for the city of Santa Barbara. We're grateful.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Mr. Casey, I am going to close the meeting by letting people know that tomorrow we have a city council meeting. It looks like the finance committee starts at noon, ordinance committee at 12:30, our regular meeting at 2. And then on Wednesday, May 5th, we have another budget hearing. That one is the fire department, information technology, and waterfront. And then on Friday, the 7th, city administrator's office, mayor and council, human resources, and finance. So this is a big week for us to look at all of our budget presentations. I thank airport and library for being here today, and we'll go ahead and close this meeting. Meeting adjourned.